right, the Philippines seems to have a lot of really interesting urban legends and stories.
Oh yeah, and
Really
we are gonna get into some today. First of all, we want to give a big shout out to
Test purposes 3293. They suggested this video. And yeah, like if you guys have any suggestions for things you want to see, let us know in the comments.
always. Yeah, we do read them, believe it or not. So yeah.
We put out videos 3 times a day, so we'll probably get to it.
Starting us off today, we have the legends of the Romblon Triangle, which is, as the name implies, the Philippines version of the Bermuda Triangle, located between the islands of Mindoro, the Dos Hermanas, and the Sibuyan Islands within the Romblon province. Of course, much like the Bermuda Triangle, the Romblon Triangle has been the site of many strange disappearances throughout the years, including the world's worst non-war related maritime disaster, in which the merchant vessel Donna Paz inexplicably collided with an oil tanker in 1987. The bizarre, seemingly avoidable disaster cost the lives of all 4,000 individuals aboard the ships, which promptly sank into the ocean after colliding with one another. Prior to this event, another vessel, the merchant vessel Don Juan, sank, ending the lives of 176 passengers, and many years later in 2008, the merchant vessel Princess of the Stars capsized, killing 118 passengers out of 151. So what caused this? Whether improper planning, or perhaps, as the legend goes, a mythical creature residing in the heart of the Romblon that lurks in the shadows and attacks the ships of sailors who make the mistake of crossing the passage at night. But who really knows?
Next up, we have the tale of the jeepney ride. So jeepneys are the primary source of public transportation in the Philippines. They're basically a cross between a jeep and a minibus, and they're covered with like all these colorful decorations. They look really fun. If you've ever been on one, let me know what it's actually like riding in one. So, like with any urban legend, there are different versions, but it usually goes something like this. A young woman is leaving work late. Luckily, there's a jeepney outside and she hops in. She's the only passenger. She minds her own business, listening to music or whatever, but she soon notices that the driver is glaring at her through the rear view mirror. He looks away when they lock eyes, but every time she looks back up again, he's staring. She starts getting uncomfortable at this point, but luckily, she's just about made it to her destination. She goes to get off the jeepney when suddenly the driver takes off. Panicked, she yells at the guy to stop, that she wants to get off, but he just keeps driving. At this point, she thinks she's going to die. She can't jump off the thing either because they're going way too fast. But then the jeepney screeches to a halt. The woman opens her eyes. They're back at her stop. She goes to hop off the vehicle when the driver turns around. He looks horrified and explains to her that when he looked in the rear view mirror, she had no head, a bad omen signifying her death, and that he had to drive around and confuse whatever evil spirit had followed her onto his jeepney. The woman finally gets out of the vehicle, but the next day wakes up to find a crowd and police outside her house. The jeepney had crashed into a nearby tree. That bad omen the driver had seen was for him, not his passenger.
So remember that creature I was telling you guys about earlier? The one that lives in the heart of the Romblon? Well, it isn't actually just some unknown entity, but rather it's an aswang. An aswang is an evil sort of shape-shifting witch-vampire hybrid that particularly enjoys the taste of human flesh and BLOOD. Sorry guys, you know I can't say that word on here. It preys on victims at night, assuming the forms of various animals, but mainly cats and wolves due to their stealth hunting abilities. It is said that when the aswang chooses its prey, it will perch on the top of their homes and use their snake-like tongue to survey the area. When the night reaches its darkest point, the aswang enters its victims' residences and eats them, or curses them. But believe it or not, in the case of the aswang, you'd probably prefer to get eaten, because generally the curses involve either rice, sand, or even bugs pouring out of the orifices of those unfortunate enough to fall under the creature's wicked spell, and that's just gross. Sorry for telling you, but if I had to read about it, you have to hear about it and visualize it.
Next up, we have the hospital elevator urban legend. The story goes something like this. A doctor at a hospital was working late into the night. Now, this particular hospital is rather notorious. Strange stuff has been known to happen. Some say the whole building is cursed, but our doctor hadn't experienced anything unsettling at the hospital, never saw anything he didn't have a logical explanation for, which would all end on this very night. So the doctor is heading to the elevator, his shift is over, the doors open, and there's one other person inside. He goes to get in when suddenly his ears perk up. There's this painful moan coming from the end of the hallway. He turns around to see a patient running towards the elevator, arms outstretched, pleading with them to hold the doors. The doctor notices something and rushes into the elevator, repeatedly hitting the button for the doors to close. The other man in the elevator turns to the doctor and says, "What's wrong? Why'd you close the doors on him?" The doctor looks horrified. He takes a moment to compose himself before saying, "Didn't you see? That guy had a red wristband on. Only the corpses in the morgue have red wristbands." The elevator goes completely silent before the other man holds up his arm, saying, "You mean like this one?"
Going up at number 10 now, we have the Demon Bridge of County Monaghan. This is a story of death. The Demon Bride is said to have terrorized funeral goers for at least 200 years. Her victims now lie in the churchyards where they fell. Across County Monaghan, people report the same thing. The Demon Bride watches funerals and waits as the deceased are laid to rest. As everyone leaves, the Demon Bride approaches a young man straggling behind. She transforms into a beautiful young woman and makes him promise to meet her a month from that day back there at the graveyard. She seals the deal with a kiss and then vanishes. As he leaves the graveyard, his blood runs cold and a deep sense of despair washes over him. He realizes he has sold his body and soul to the evil spirit and his life has been forfeited. Over the next month, he descends into madness before eventually dying. He is laid to rest in the same graveyard as before, exactly a month after he first met the Demon Bride, his promise fulfilled. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Banshee. The Banshee is a female spirit that wails in the night as a sign that death is coming for a family member. Legend says the Banshee has long streaming hair, wears a grey cloak over a green dress, and her eyes are red from constant weeping. According to the Ancient Legends of Ireland book, the Banshee may be seen at night as a shrouded woman crouched beneath the trees, lamenting with veiled face or flying past the moonlight crying bitterly, and the cry of this spirit is mournful beyond all other sounds on earth and betokens certain death for some member of the family whenever it is heard in the silence of the night. Could not think of a more scary description myself if I tried. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Dergdu. Many countries have a vampire legend. This is the Irish one. The name translates from Irish as red bloodsucker. Originally, the Dergdu was a normal girl who lived over 2,000 years ago. She was said to be beautiful with blood red lips and pale blonde hair. Her true name has been lost in the sands of time, overshadowed by what she became. Men travelled from all over Ireland in the hopes of just being with her. However, she fell in love with a local man who was very poor. He was perfect for her, but without money, her father would never let them marry. Instead, he married her off to an old, cruel man who abused her. He liked to draw blood from her while she was locked up in a tower cell. One day, she gave up hope of her true love ever rescuing her and committed suicide by refusing to eat. Her dying breath was a vengeance against the living. Her undead corpse rose from the earth on the night she was buried, thirsting for the blood that was taken from her. She was now the Dergdu, stealing blood from children, from the innocent, and especially from young men. She would call to them in the night with a haunting siren song that lured them to their deaths. Some say she still wanders the Irish countryside at night, calling out to her next victim. At number 7 now, we have the Changelings. These are mythical fairy creatures that take the place of a newborn human child that has been stolen by the fairies. The fairies will steal the child to act as a servant for them. Families would try and see if their baby was actually a changeling through a number of different ways. One of them involved placing them over a fire. If the baby was a changeling, it would leave by just climbing up the chimney. The real child would then be returned. It was thought that the fairies preferred to steal baby boys. As a result, many Irish families would dress their baby boys in dresses to confuse the fairies. Moving on to number 6 now, we have the Dullahan. The Dullahan is a headless headless rider of the night who carries his own head under one arm. His mouth is locked in a hideous grin that touches both sides of his head. His flesh is rotting and he uses the spine of a human for a horsewhip. His job is as a foreteller of death. When he stops riding, a person is due to die. He will call out the person's name, at which point they drop to the floor dead. There is no way to stop the Dullahan. All locks and gates open when he approaches. They don't like being watched either and will throw blood over anyone who dares to do so. This is also taken as a mark that they are among the next to die. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Fetch. The Fetch is a supernatural double of a living person. You can have your own Fetch. They're like a doppelganger but with much more sinister undertones. Their sightings are regarded as an omen of impending death. If a person sees this dark double of themselves, it's said to mean they are going to die soon. Sometimes the Fetch may even have a clue as to how that person will die, perhaps a bullet wound in the head or a slash across the chest. Either way, it's not something you want to come across in your life. The Fetch is said to appear ghostly or shadowy and may vanish down alleyways or halls if followed. At number 4 now, we have the Puka. According to Irish folklore, these are strange little creatures obsessed with causing as much havoc as possible. They visit farms and seaside communities to tear down fences and disturb the animals there. The creepy part is that the legend says the Puka sometimes just stand outside of a farmhouse and calls the people outside by their name. If anyone steps out, the Puka will carry them away forever. There are stories of them being bloodthirsty and vampire-like creatures, as well as ones that describe them as man-eating beings, hunting down, killing, and eating their victims. Next up, number 3 now, we have the Alp Luatra. This creature is also known as the Joint Eater. Don't worry, it doesn't eat your joints, but this creature does something just as strange. It's said to be a newt-like creature that preys on people who fall asleep near rivers or streams. It jumps down their throat and lives in their stomach so that it can eat the victim's food. In the collection of folk tales called Beside the Fire, a farmer was starving from an Alp Luatra that was in his stomach, and he found a way to get rid of the creature. He ate large amounts of salted meat until he could eat no more. Then he lay by a stream with his mouth open. The Alp Luatra was driven to thirst by all the salt, and eventually they all jumped out of the man and into the water. Gross. Moving on to number 2 now, we have the Black Cat of Killarkey House. There is said to be a beast that wanders the forests of County Dublin around the old Killarkey House. The animal has been sighted for centuries there, and people say it's supernatural. For a lot of people, for a while, this was nothing more than a superstition. That was until 1968 when a young couple bought the Killarkey House and started renovating it. The hired workers there reported strange noises and events and a big black cat with demonic eyes that haunted them. It would appear and disappear in a moment. The owners didn't believe them until they saw it too, just standing in the hallways staring at them and snarling. The couple got a priest to perform an exorcism on the house, which seemed to get rid of the beast for a while. Then a group of actors held a seance in the house which brought the black cat back, and with many people now saying it still prowls there to this day. And finally, at number 1 now, we have the Slough. Some say these spectral creatures are demons, but a closer term would probably be malicious spirits. The Slough are dead sinners who have been doomed to spend an eternity hunting for the souls of people who are dying. According to Irish folklore, they come from the west, flying like a flock of birds, trying to enter a house where they sense someone is dying in order to steal their soul and rob them of a happy afterlife. It was said that many families would actually shut their west-facing windows at all times to keep the Slough out of their homes. Some folklore experts have compared this to the Wild Hunt, a European folktale about ghostly hounds or spirits traveling around in packs foretelling of death and disaster.
At our halfway point today, let's talk a bit about the My Way curse. As in My Way, the hit song written by Paul Anka and performed by none other than Frank Sinatra. It's great, right? Well, have you ever heard of the My Way killings that took place in the Philippines between 2000 and 2007, and then again in 2018? Well, if you haven't, buckle up because it is one hell of a ride. In 2007, the first My Way death occurred after a 29-year-old man attempted to sing the song at a local karaoke bar. He was off key, and so a security guard fired a projectile at the man, swiftly ending his singing career and his life. After that, the killings continued to the point where many karaoke bar owners actually removed the song from rotation. If you wanted to sing it, you had to book a private room for your own safety. After 2012, the killings had pretty much died down, probably because people were too scared to sing the cursed tune, but in 2018, a 28-year-old man was impaled by his 60-year-old neighbor after a fight broke out over the song. Later that year, a curfew was even imposed on karaoke bars in an attempt to lessen the violence. So I have to ask you guys, is the song cursed, or does the Filipino population just really dislike Sinatra?
The San Juanico Bridge took 4 years to complete. It's one of the longest bridges in the Philippines. But there's a dark legend behind it. It's said that during the bridge's construction, human remains were mixed in with the cement, said to supposedly make the foundation of the bridge stronger. But these human remains weren't obtained in the most pleasant of ways. You see, from 1969 to 1973, as the bridge was being built, a number of missing young persons cases were reported in the surrounding area, a much larger number than usual. These reports then seemed to suddenly stop as soon as the bridge was completed, and it's said that a fortune teller told the overseer of the construction that the bridge would never be completed unless the BOOD of young people was mixed in with the cement.
Up next, we have the Multo White Lady. So what is a multo? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's the spirit of a dead person or animal that comes to visit family members who are still alive, and they're generally quite peaceful. In layman's terms, it's a friendly ghost. The White Lady is a multo, but a different kind of multo. You see, the White Lady doesn't just appear to members of her family. In fact, she doesn't even appear to just those who knew her. She kind of just appears in empty buildings, on the edges of cliffs, and near forests and roadways. Not only that, but she's said to be quite malicious. The White Lady, who is told to either have no face or a face covered in BLOOD, has been the cause of many car accidents over the years. Drivers reported crashing after looking into their rear view mirror only to see the woman sitting, gruesome and eerie, in their back seat. Many believe that the multo is a woman who was violated and killed by Japanese soldiers during World War II, and now she spends her days seeking revenge on pretty much anyone.
Our next urban legend deals with slippers and sandals being left outside. So this urban legend was apparently pretty big in the 90s especially. A lot of folks growing up at that time seemed to have stories about adults telling them not to leave their sandals, slippers, shoes, anything out in front of the house when coming in from playing out in the street, and to make sure to bring their footwear back inside. The reason being that cult members would apparently prowl the streets, and those whose flip-flops have been left outside would be kidnapped and sacrificed. These cult members were often said to be Satanists. I guess they'd figure if there was footwear sitting outside someone's home, they'd know there were people inside so that they could attack. Maybe these cult members just hate messy front entrances so much it throws them into a blind rage. If anyone has more insight into this, let us know down in the comments.
Okay, you guys, it's Berberoka time. I don't know why I said it like it's a thing. I don't think it's a thing, but anyways, you're probably wondering what's wrong with me or what a Berberoka is. Well, it's daylight saving, so I'm down on sleep, and also a Berberoka is a mythical water creature found in the freshwater rivers of the Philippines. It's an ogre-like being that does a pretty good job blending in with its surroundings because of its skin, which resembles foliage-adorned rocks. It's probably friendly, right? Wrong. In fact, it's not friendly at all, and it does not like fishermen. The Berberoka's main move is to suck the water out of lakes until schools of fish become easily accessible to fishermen. When they try to catch the fish, the Berberoka spits the water back out, causing the fishermen to drown. I can't actually tell if he really hates fishermen or if he just really likes the fish, but let me know what you guys think.
And finally, we have the headless priests. Now, there are tales of ghostly headless priests apparently told in various parts of the world, but the Philippines is probably the most well-known for this. So the tale of the headless priest, or priests, would be whispered about mostly in Catholic schools. It's just as the name suggests, it's a figure wearing a priest's robe, floating around without a head, often trying to retrieve it. As for how the priest died, there are a couple main versions. One is that the priest died at the hands of the Spanish during the colonial era, and the other that Japanese soldiers beheaded several Filipino priests during World War II.
Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Paluda. This creature has been a feared part of French folklore for generations. Its name means hairy or shaggy beast, but to be honest, it's a whole lot more than that. They are said to have stingers like a porcupine, the head and neck of a snake, tortoise feet, and a serpent tail. Their breath withers crops. They can fire their quills like arrows, spit acid out of their tails, and if they attack you, you're doomed. They are said to be invulnerable all over their body except for their tail. With their huge size, people say they could create floods simply by stepping on rivers. Some people believe that the Paluda was one of the animals that was not saved by Noah and his ark in the Bible. However, it still managed to survive the Great Flood by hiding in caves. Afterwards, it went on a rampage across the world, killing everything that got to board the ark instead. Some people say it still continues this today, even if they're only left in France. Next up at number 7 now, we have the Château de Trécesson. This is a medieval castle in the Brittany region of France. From the outside, it's an impressive looking building, attracting tourists from all over the world. But don't be fooled by its outward charm. The chateau is famous for its terrifying ghost stories. One night, many years ago, a black coach stopped near the moat and 2 men got out. They used shovels and picks to dig a deep grave in silence. From the coach, they dragged a young woman dressed as a bride, her face as pale as her dress. She didn't cry or beg for mercy as her executioners laid her in her grave and covered her with dirt. The men then rode off into the darkness. A local man saw the whole thing from the trees and gathered the other villagers to help. They dug her up and tried to save her, but by sunrise she had died without ever saying a word. They never knew who she was or why those men killed her, but it wasn't the last time people saw her. In the centuries since then, locals have sworn they see her ghost floating on the waters of the moat near where she died, still in her wedding dress and still deathly silent. Next up at number 6 now, we have the catacombs. This is perhaps one of the most famous and creepy parts of Paris. They are a series of tunnels that wind underneath the city. They are said to hold the remains of some 6 million people there. They were first started in the late 18th century to help deal with the city's overflowing cemeteries. A sign at the entrance reads, "Stop. This is the Empire of the Dead." 800 meters of the walkways are just lined entirely with bones. Over the years, locals have shared many stories of dark goings on there among the bones, legends of Masonic cult meetings, black masses, Nazi gatherings, gang fights, and serial killers. Coming at number 5 now, we have the wooden leg. In the Château de Combourgy, there is a ghost with a wooden leg. It's said to be the ghost of Comte de Combourg. He was a general who lived there 300 years ago and lost his leg in battle, having it replaced by a wooden one. In life, his leg was said to send echoes around the castle so that everyone knew where he was. After he died though, that never went away. In the years since, many visitors have said they've heard his leg thumping around the castle in the night. Some even say they've seen it walking up and down the stairs by itself. No body attached to it, accompanied only by a mysterious black cat. Moving on to number 4 now, we have a strange concert. On June 2nd, 1925, a 24-year-old medical student named John Romier was studying in a garden in Paris. An elderly man approached him dressed in a strange riding coat. The 2 men began to talk about classical music, and eventually the old man invited John to come and listen to his concert that he was putting on with some friends on Friday. John accepted and asked for his name and address. His name was Alphonse Barrière, and he gave him his address, 3rd floor on the left. Next Friday, John arrived at the given address and was welcomed in, where he met Alphonse's whole family. They were lovely to him, but John couldn't quite shake the strange feeling that something wasn't right. Maybe it was the old-fashioned apartment with its outdated decor and gas lighting. The musicians sat down and performed some classical music, including Mozart. John stayed for a few hours after and talked to Alphonse about music. He thanked him and then he left. Out in the street, he realized he had left his lighter inside. He went up and rang the bell, but there was no answer. He kept trying until a neighbor came out and asked what the problem was. John said he was trying to see Alphonse, but the neighbor said, "I think you're mistaken. Alphonse has been dead for 20 years, and that apartment has been empty since then." John told him that this was impossible. He had just spent a whole night with him and his family. The neighbor started to become suspicious of John and accused him of being a thief. The police unlocked the apartment and took John inside along with the owner of the place, who was actually Alphonse's great-great-great-great-grandson. They walked through the apartment, which was now empty. When they got to the back room, they found a side table covered in dust. There, sitting on top, was John's lighter. Some say that Jean experienced a real-life time slip. Others refuse to believe this happened at all. Either way, there's an official police report out there that contains this whole story, and many people believe it's still unsolved. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Derry vampire. In the city of Derry, you can find an area known as Slaughterverty. There lies a grassy mound known as O'Cathain's Dolmen, marked by a single thorn tree. Legend says that a vampire is contained within it. Back in the 5th century, a chieftain known as Abatak ruled over the area. He was known for his cruelty and viciousness, even to his own tribe. Locals said that he was actually an evil wizard, using his powers to rise to a position of power. When he died, the tribe gave him a respectful burial. They thought that was the end of it. A day later, though, his reanimated corpse appeared in the village. He demanded a bowl of fresh human blood, or else he would release his terror upon them. The terrified village turned to help from another local chieftain called Cathain, begging that he kill Abatak. Well, he did. He came and killed Abatak, but he rose again, so he killed him again and again, but still he kept on living, returning to the village in search of human blood. Cathain consulted a Christian hermit for guidance. He directed that Abatak be killed using a wooden sword made of yew. He then had to be buried head downwards, weighted with a heavy stone. Finally, thorn bushes should be planted tightly in a circle around the grave. Somehow, it worked. To this day, the mound still remains. People believe it should be left exactly as it is, or else the vampire will return, demanding human blood. Next up at number 9 now, we have the cottage of Coonean. In Coonean, on the Fermanagh-Tyrone border, lies an old abandoned cottage. In 1911, it belonged to the Murphy family. Legend says they were being plagued by poltergeists, mischievous ghosts that wanted them out. The family chose to stay. Mrs. Murphy was a widow. Her and the children began to hear mysterious noises at night. There were knocks on the door, footsteps in the empty attic above, and strange groans emitting from the walls. This was only the beginning though. Plates began sliding across tables by themselves, and bedcloths moved around in empty beds. Then it started getting even more intense. Pots and pans were thrown violently against the walls while furniture floated off the ground. Even when things weren't being smashed around, a strange coldness permeated the cottage as mysterious shapes appeared and then disappeared through the walls. In the end, a Catholic priest was called in to perform 2 exorcisms, but that didn't work. Locals began to believe the family had brought this evil on themselves and stopped helping them. Finally, the Murphys caved in and emigrated to America in 1913. Locals believe the ghost followed them. Now, over 100 years on, their cottage lies abandoned. People still say an evil atmosphere surrounds it. Next up at number 8 now, we have the Dunsandle mantelpiece. This house in Galway has so many ghost stories attached to it, it's hard to keep track of them. In the early 20th century, a stone worker who was repairing parts of the old house took a shining to one of the mantelpieces. He decided to take it with him back to his workshop. Now, legend says that the ghost of a tall man that haunted the house had somehow attached itself to the mantelpiece and went with it. The workshop then became haunted. Objects would fly around the room. Glasses and other items would smash or break. Perhaps the creepiest thing was the actual sightings of the ghost, often accompanied with sounds of an Irish fiddle playing in the distance. The only way to stop the hauntings was for the stoneworker to return the mantelpiece to Dunstable House, where it remains to this day, along with its ghostly legend. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the Faceless Lady of Belverley Castle. In Cork Harbour lies Belverley Castle. In the 17th century, it's said that a woman named Margaret Hodnett lived there. She loved mirrors. Back then, mirrors were a symbol of luxury and wealth. Not many people owned them. Margaret had many of them so that she could always remind herself of her famous beauty. She had an on and off relationship with a local lord called Clon Rockenby. He asked for her hand in marriage many times, but she always refused. Eventually, he had enough of the rejection and decided to raise a small army to take her castle and her by force. Definitely an overreaction, I'd say. You can't just raise an army if someone doesn't want you. Anyway, the attack didn't go well. Clon was forced to siege the castle. Margaret held on for a year before eventually surrendering. Clon entered the castle to find Margaret starved to death, a skeletal figure, and not the beauty he had sought after for so long. Out of rage, he smashed her favourite mirror to pieces. Then one of Margaret's soldiers killed him with a sword. After that, Margaret descended into madness. She looked for mirrors constantly to see if her beauty had returned, but it never did. She died of old age, and locals say her ghost appears in the castle as a lady in white, sometimes with a veiled face and sometimes with no face at all. They say you can still see her, staring at the walls where mirrors used to hang, tilting her head as if looking at her reflection. Moving on to number 6 now, we have Corny. In the early 20th century, reports began of a ghost called Corny haunting a house in Dublin. The husband had sprained his knee badly and had to use a crutch, thumping around during the day and then leaving it by his bedside at night. One night, the wife woke up to the sound of the same thumping in the night, but her husband was next to her and the crutch was still by their bed. It was actually Corny, a poltergeist who was mocking the husband by thumping around in the night. He wreaked havoc on the house, playing practical jokes on the servants. Some of them were so terrified that they threatened to leave. The wife agreed to move them into a bedroom at the top of the house with a special press bed. On the first night, as they went to bed, the doors of the press bed flung open and Corny's voice called out, "Ha, you devils, I am here before you. I am not confined to any particular part of this house." He told them that in life he had been a bad man who had died a bad death. He said he couldn't tell them in what realm he was now because it would anger God. Next up at number 5 now, we have the Dobar Chew. This creature is also known as the King Otter in Irish folklore. It's said to resemble an otter, a dog and a fish all at once. There have been many documented sightings of it over the years. In the town of Cornwall in County Leitrim lies the grave of a woman who was said to have actually been killed by the Dobar coup in the 17th century. Her headstone says she was called Grain. Legend says her husband supposedly heard her scream one night as she was washing her clothes in the lake. He ran to help her, but when he arrived, she was already dead. Her body bloody and mutilated by the creature. The man killed the Dobar Coup by stabbing it right through the heart. As it died, it made a strange whistling noise. At that moment, another Dobar Coup rose up from the water. It was the mate of the first one. The man fought and killed that one too. Since then, many people know there may be more out there. Some have reported seeing and even fighting them to the death. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the Whispering Mummies. St. Michan's Church is a 330-year-old building that is built on an even more ancient burial ground. Catacombs and grave vaults lie in the darkness below the church with coffins full of well-preserved mummies. Visitors report strange, whispering voices down there, along with an oppressive feeling in the tight hallways. It's a feeling of being in a crowd of people, despite there being nobody around. Some have even reported feeling unseen hands touching them on the back of their necks. For people that go there, the feeling of being in a spirit crowd when they can't see anyone is a very unnerving experience. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the Sligo Mansion. On the Coolera Peninsula in Sligo, a man called William Phibbs built a stately mansion known as Seafield House. It overlooked the sea, and with over 20 rooms, it was a detestable symbol of wealth during the Irish Great Famine. Locals thought that he was a cruel and uncaring landlord. By the early 20th century, his descendant, Owen Phibbs, was using the mansion to store Egyptian artifacts and mummies there. Not long after, there were reports of a poltergeist terrorizing the house. According to some servants, the house would shake and objects would smash into the walls. A ghostly horse-drawn coach was seen trotting up the driveway. Priests were called in to perform several exorcisms, but the activity wouldn't cease. Eventually, it got so bad, even the Phibbs family were driven away. Next up at number 2 now, we have the Murdered Jester. Malahide Castle in Dublin was built by King Henry II of England in the 12th century. It hosted grand medieval feasts, complete with minstrels and jesters for entertainment. One of the jesters, named Puck, saw a female prisoner at a feast one night and fell in love with her. He tried to help her escape, but was stabbed to death outside of the castle by the guards. In his dying breath, he vowed to haunt the place forever. Since then, there have apparently been many sightings of him. Visitors report seeing and photographing his spectral features appearing in the thick ivy that grows on the castle walls near where he was killed. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Vanishing Island. On July 7th, 1878, the residents of Ballycotton in County Cork were shocked to see an island out there in the ocean that had never been there before. Locals stood on the shoreline in absolute disbelief. They could see woodlands, fields, and deep valleys. Fishermen sailed out to investigate, but as they approached, the island flickered out of existence. This isn't an isolated case either. Similar sightings have occurred in County Kerry, County Clare, and Ballymena Lane Bay in Galway. Some have tried to explain the sightings of the vanishing island as a trick of the light, an optical illusion due to light refraction. Others link it to the old Irish legend of a vanishing island that becomes visible once every 7 years. I did some calculations, and if that's true, then 2018 is also a year where it should appear again. So keep your eyes peeled for that story. What do you guys think of this? Trick of the light, parallel universe, or spectral island? Going up at number 10 now, we have the Angkor. This legend comes from Brittany in France. Perhaps the best comparison for this one is that of the Grim Reaper. The Angkor is said to resemble the Grim Reaper, wearing a black coat that covers his face. He also carries a scythe that strikes fear into the hearts of all who see him. Now, unlike the Grim Reaper though, the Angkor is not tasked with killing mortals whose time has come. His job is to guard the souls of the graveyard, to collect the ones that have been lost, and to bring them to his realm. No one living has ever seen his face, for to do so would mean certain death. His eye sockets are like smouldering ashes glowing with an eerie light. His eyes were removed many years ago by an angel who was angry when the Angkor attempted to rip the soul from a good untainted man. He is said to drive a black cart or hearse pulled by 2 horses. Some say it is the souls he harvests that end up working for him, loading his carts with bodies so that he can remove their souls later. If you hear his knock, a death in the family will come within just 1 year. If a person finds a red mark outside their door, it's a sign of an approaching illness. This became known as the mark of death. Perhaps the scariest aspect of the Angkor is that there is always room for 1 or more bodies in his cart. Some say he has never stopped harvesting souls, and he will continue to do so forever. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Dame Blanches. Those of you who know a little bit of French might know this translates to the White Ladies. These mythical beings have been mentioned all over France, and the best description I've heard of them is that they're beautiful trolls. Not because they look like trolls, but because they are said to live under bridges. They wait for young men who need to cross. They love to dance and will crawl out from below the bridge to try and dance with the men. They are charming, and usually the men agree. If a man does, they will dance, and then he will be allowed to pass without any problems. The men who refuse though will be thrown off the bridge to their deaths. Many people believe this was the key to their success. The survivors would always tell other people about the lovely women in white at the bridge who wanted to dance with them. The ones who knew their true terror would be dead and washed down the river. Next up at number 8 now, we have the Tarasque. When you think of dragons, many people would jump to China, but France has its very own. The Tarasque is a fearsome dragon-like creature that has been mentioned in southern France for generations. In medieval times, it was said to devastate the land. Those who lived to tell the tale said it was a dragon with a lion's head, 6 short legs like a bear's, an ox-like body covered with a turtle shell, and a scaly tail that ended in a scorpion stinger. They say it has teeth like swords and as big as horns. Sounds pretty horrible, right? Well, the people of southern France certainly thought so. Legend says the creature would hide in the river and attack passers-by after sinking their vessels. The King of Nerlux was said to have attacked one with knights and catapults. The creature was almost impossible to kill. Saint Martha charmed the beast with hymns and prayers and led it back to the city. The terrified people attacked it as it slept, and the creature did not fight back, ultimately dying right there. The townspeople felt so bad that they renamed the city Tarascon in the creature's honor, a place that you can still visit today. Just keep one eye open as you sleep. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the kidney thieves. The story goes like this. A man in Paris once had too much to drink, and when he stumbled into his home, he forgot to lock his door. The next morning, he woke up naked in his bathtub, which was filled with ice. Next to the tub, he found his phone and a note that read, "Call an ambulance right away and don't move." There was also a bottle of champagne in the ice and a national health insurance reimbursement form stapled to the note. The man panicked but had no choice than to follow what the note said. He called the ambulance, which took him to the hospital. The doctors were shocked to find that someone had surgically removed one of his kidneys. He used the medical form to claim the money back in medical fees and got 30,000 euros. Many people in France have spread this scary story of organ thieves who are sometimes willing to pay a fair price, but they'll always take what they want by force. Next up at number 6 now, we have the Vanishing Hotel. The story goes like this. 2 couples were driving through France on their way to Spain. To break up the journey, they decided to stay for the night in Montelimar in France. The hotel was full, and so they set out to find a new place to stay. They stumbled across a street with old-fashioned buildings and advertisements for a local circus. They found a hotel with some vacancies and decided to stay there for the night. They were surprised to find the hotel had no elevators or telephones. Every door had wooden catches on rather than locks. There were bolsters instead of pillows on the bed. The plumbing was very old-fashioned but seemed somehow new. Their bed sheets were made of calico, a cheap-looking fabric that hasn't been used to make linen for centuries. The windows were even worse. They didn't have any glass, just shutters. Despite the strangeness of this hotel, they stayed the night. night. Next morning at breakfast they saw a few people enter the hotel. A woman in a long old-fashioned dress with buttoned boots. Then there were two French policemen wearing old uniforms. The hotel bill was very cheap, less than 10% of what they were expecting to pay. Nonetheless, they enjoyed their stay and decided to return to the hotel on their way back from Spain 2 weeks later. This time though, they couldn't find it anywhere. The cobbled road and the old-fashioned circus signs were still there, but the hotel was gone. It had disappeared. When they went to develop their holiday photos, all the ones they had taken of the hotel were missing. They weren't even just blanks either. The photos physically didn't exist anymore. It was like the hotel had never existed at all. These details have been verified by a number of historians, but nobody has ever been able to offer an explanation for this mysterious time slip. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Matagot. In southern France, people say the Matagot is an animal spirit. The interesting thing about this creature is that it takes the form of any animal it chooses. It's often a black cat, but can also be a rat, fox, dog, or even a cow. They are generally evil, but can sometimes bring wealth into a home if it's well fed. Traditionally, a wealth-bringing Matagot must be lured with a fresh chicken. The new owner must then carry it home without looking back once. If the cat is given the first mouthful of food and drink at every meal, it will repay its owner with a solid gold coin each morning. However, there is a catch. Nobody can keep a Matagot forever. They say if the owner is dying, they will suffer a long and painful death if they do not free the Matagot. Next up at number 4 now, we have the Gargoyle. The story goes that this creature was a terrible sea serpent who emerged one day in the Seine River and began to spew water about the countryside. It created a giant tidal wave, and whatever the waters did not kill, the dragon himself devoured for its meal. Its name literally means gargler for this reason. One day, the Archbishop of Rouen intended to put a stop to the problem. He knew the creature lived in a cavernous lair on the banks of the Seine River, and he intended to travel there to stop it from rampaging anymore. Nobody wanted to help him though. They said it was a suicide mission. Instead, he took with him 2 prisoners who were already condemned to death. When they got there, the beast attacked them ferociously. However, the Archbishop made the sign of the cross with his fingers, and then the dragon fell docile. They then bound the dragon by its neck and led it back to the town. There, the people condemned it to die by fire because it had killed so many with water. Fire raged for days until an enormous pile of ash was left behind. They cast the pile into the river from where the beast has originally come from. Ever since then, the drains that divert the rainwater from the roof of the local church building have been decorated with images of the monster as a reminder of what the people suffered through. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Beast of Gevaudan. This fearsome creature is not steeped in the mists of time from thousands of years ago. It's fairly recent and well documented, which perhaps makes it even more unnerving. The beast was described as a sort of werewolf, half man, half beast that preyed on people in the 18th century. The first report of it came in 1764. A young woman was tending to her livestock when the creature attacked her. It made several attempts before being driven away by her own cattle. She testified that the creature was a large wolf-like thing with reddish fur, small ears, a dog-like head, and a long tail. At the time, people thought this was just a one-off event, but they were wrong. Just a few days later, a 14-year-old girl was killed by the beast not far from the first sighting. Her body had disappeared, presumably devoured whole. Now it was serious. The villagers began to panic and the attacks got more brutal. There were several reports that people's heads were just being snapped clean off by the beast. The legend grew so big that even the King of France himself heard about it. No matter how many hunters he sent, the attacks kept happening. In the end, in 1767, 300 hunters finally tracked down a beast which required a silver bullet to be killed. Some say they got it wrong though, and that this was just a large wolf and the real beast or its offspring may still roam the hills of France. Moving on to number 2 now, we have Les Lavandières. This legend has been spoken of in northern France for centuries. The name translates to the midnight washerwomen. They are said to be 3 old laundresses in Celtic mythology. The old women go to the water's edge at midnight to wash the clothes of those who are about to die. Those who see them say they're small, dressed all in green, and have webbed feet. This also led to them being called the night ducks. They are a terrifying omen of death to all who have seen them. It can mean a death in the family or the death of the person actually sees them. Now, despite their appearance, the washerwomen are said to be very agile and strong, almost supernaturally so. In other Celtic countries, if you can get between the women and the water, they will ask you 3 questions which you must answer honestly. If you do, you'll be given 3 wishes. However, due to their ominous relationship with death, many people will turn and run. at the first sight of them. And finally, at number 1 now, we have the faux follet. You guys may have heard this called by other names in English, such as the will-o'-the-wisp or the jack-o'-lantern. It's some sort of atmospheric ghost light which appears in shades of faint blue. Other times it can be yellow, red or green in appearance. It appears suspended in the air, sometimes flickering, and often appears just briefly at night above cemeteries, swamps or bogs. Aside from its ghostly light, faux follets are generally harmless. However, beware, as these wisps are said to be spirits of the dead or supernatural beings. If you try and follow them, they will lead you to your death, and perhaps you too will become a wisp.
The Beast of Gevaudan, terrifying creature's tale, has become a blend of fact, fiction, and folklore. The legend speaks of a monstrous beast that haunted the rural landscape of Gevaudan, a region in south-central France, during the mid-18th century. According to the stories, the creature possessed an insatiable appetite for human flesh, targeting women and children as its preferred victims. Descriptions varied, but many accounts depicted a fearsome creature resembling a massive-sized wolf or a hybrid predator, possibly with blood-red eyes and a black stripe running down its back. Its ruthless attacks, coupled with its supposed invincibility against conventional weaponry, left the people in a state of dread, desperation, and as the legend grew, so did the attempts to bring an end to the creature's reign of terror. Countless hunters, soldiers, and villagers embarked on these journeys to track down and take out the beast, yet the creature thwarted their efforts time and time again, evading traps, bullets, and even organized hunts. The legend reached its climax when a local hunter named Jean Chastel claimed to have slain the beast using a silver bullet. Over the years, the legend of the Beast of Gevaudan has been dissected by historians, mythologists, and enthusiasts, giving rise to various theories about the true nature of the creature. And apparently this did happen, it's just we're not quite sure if it was some sort of paranormal creature, like a werewolf, or if it was just a particularly large rogue wolf. Number 7, the Well to Hell. The Well to Hell urban legend was spread through whispers, emails, and internet forums. According to the legend, in 1989, a team of Russian scientists drilled a hole deep in an unknown location in Siberia, and as they delved deeper into the Earth's crust, they allegedly pierced a barrier that unleashed unimaginable horrors. The story goes that as the drill reached an astonishing depth, the temperature spiked dramatically and strange sounds began emanating from the hole. The team lowered a heat-tolerant microphone down into the hole, and disturbingly, the team claimed to have detected agonizing screams of tormented souls and eerie demonic voices rising from the depths. Terrified, they quickly withdrew the drill, fearing that they had inadvertently opened a gateway to hell itself. There is an audio recording of this supposed hellish audio, and spoiler alert, it's been ruled as a hoax. However, it is pretty unsettling to listen to. I remember hearing this years and years ago when I was a kid, and it kind of freaked me out. Next on the list, we have The Faceless Woman. This story takes place in the London Underground at Beacon Tree Station. The story goes that a station supervisor was working the late shift, minding his own business, when the door to his office started to shake. First, he just brushed it off, thinking it was just the rumble of passing trains on other lines, but when the door didn't stop rattling, even into the wee hours of the morning when no more trains were running, the worker decided probably time to leave. He headed up to the upper office where his coworker was stationed, and as he was making his way up the staircase, he just couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Someone was trailing behind him. He turned around and was greeted by a disturbing sight. A woman stood below him with long blonde hair and without a face, standing just a few feet away. He suddenly dashed up the stairs in a panic before finally finding safety in the top office. Once there, a colleague could see the fear in his face before asking him, "Did you see a woman with long blonde hair and no face?" Next up is the Vanishing Hotel Room, aka the Vanishing Lady. This legend began circulating in the late 1800s, taking place in France. Like with most urban legends, there are multiple versions of the tale, but it goes something like this. A mother and daughter had recently arrived in Paris. They check into a hotel, but pretty soon the mother begins feeling ill, collapses. A doctor arrives who informs the daughter that her mother will need medicine. That can only be picked up at the other end of town. The daughter sets out to get the medicine, but when she returns to the hotel hours later, her mother is no longer there. In a panic, she asks the staff where her mother is, but they all claim not to know who she's talking about. According to them, the girl had arrived at the hotel on her own. In some versions of the story, the girl suffers a mental breakdown and ends up at a mental institution. In another version of the legend, it is revealed that the mother had actually died of the Black Plague, and the hotel tried to cover it up by disposing of her body and pretending like they'd never seen her in order to avoid bad publicity. At number 4, we have the Russian sleep experiment. This story began circulating online, and according to the chilling tale, in 1947, Soviet researchers conducted a classified experiment in which 5 subjects were kept awake for an extended period of time. The goal was to test the effects of sleep deprivation on human physiology and their mental state. Days turned into weeks, however. The subjects began to exhibit disturbing behavior. They became increasingly paranoid and delusional, plagued by hallucinations and exhibiting signs of extreme psychological distress. Desperate attempts to stay awake led to self-mutilation as they tore into their own flesh, driven to madness by their sleep-deprived states. The most horrifying twist in the legend comes when the researchers decided to release a gas into the chamber in order to induce sleep. However, instead of providing relief, the gas triggered a nightmarish frenzy of violence. The researchers entered the room only to find one man still standing. The bodies of the other 4 men, or at least what remained of them, lay strewn about the room. Next, we have another urban legend from the London Underground, the crying girl of King's Cross Station. In 1987, deep underground in the tunnels of the London subway at King's Cross Station, a fire had broken out. The fire took the lives of 31 people, and some say they still hear the wails and cries of the poor souls who lost their lives there, especially the crying woman. Late at night, when the platform is mostly deserted, some say they spot a woman dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, sobbing into the night, the echoes of her cries reverberating off the long, empty tunnels. When they go to approach her, though, she simply disappears. Coming in at number 2, we have the Black Volga. The urban legend of the Black Volga is a chilling tale that is circulated in various parts of the world, but particularly in Eastern Europe. According to the legend, a menacing black luxury car, often identified as a Volga sedan, prowls the streets at night, instilling fear in all who cross its path. The Black Volga is said to be driven by mysterious figures, frequently described as malevolent entities or agents of the supernatural. Witnesses claim that the vehicle appears seemingly out of nowhere, its engine roaring ominously as it glides silently through the darkness. The car's windows are tinted, hiding the occupants from view and shrouding their intentions in secrecy. Terrifying encounters with the Black Volga involve tales of kidnappings, disappearances, or even encounters with supernatural beings. Some versions of the legend suggest that the car is driven by vampires or other supernatural creatures preying on unsuspecting victims in the dead of night. Some have actually theorized that perhaps Polish secret police spread these more outlandish legends in order to invalidate claims of genuine kidnappings carried out by the government. And at number 1, we have the catacombs video. Now, this video really does exist. It's just the person behind the camera who's never been identified, which has led to multiple theories about the circumstances of this case. Is it just a hoax, or was this actually a man who got lost in the catacombs, never to be seen again? This is one most of you have probably heard of, but it's a story that's always stuck with me. One that chilled me to the bone when I first heard about it and watched footage. The video is said to have been filmed in the early 90s, possibly 1993. In the black and white footage, we see a POV of the cameraman as he makes his way through the dark tunnels of the Paris catacombs. Soon, though, his breathing begins to intensify and he picks up his pace, now running aimlessly through the tunnels until he finally drops his camera altogether. Continuing to run further into the darkness, the camera continues to record until the battery dies. The camera was found later on, and searches were made for this mysterious man, but no body was ever discovered. Stories about mutated animals in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Turns out many of the animals do have odd mutations, but there's one urban legend about a mutated spider that takes things to a much more horrific level. After all, who would ever want to run into a mutated spider? Unless you thought you'd have a chance to turn out like Peter Parker, but that's not the case with this story. So, a story about a killer mutant spider from Chernobyl was reported in a Turkish newspaper in 1990. Two residents of an apartment in the Ukraine had been found in the elevator having suffered extreme loss of BLOOD, but none of it was found at the scene. It looked like it had been sucked out of them, as there were also 2 puncture wounds on their necks. People started to whisper tales about vampires stalking the building, and some residents got so scared that they avoided using the elevators completely. Then 2 detectives investigated. On the 3rd day of their investigation, the detectives were riding the elevator when it came to an abrupt stop between the 5th and 6th floors. Then the lights went out. Now at first they weren't too worried. The elevator was known to be pretty janky at times, but when they started hearing an ominous clicking noise coming from above their heads, they froze. What was this? Was it a predator? They removed one of the roof panels and shone their flashlights, only to see a foot-long black shape moving towards them. Suddenly, it was on top of one of the detectives. His partner fired at it. When backup arrived, they found the detective cowering in a corner, a mutated spider across from him. When police explored the rest of the elevator shaft, they found the thing had laid eggs, which they burnt to a crisp with flamethrowers. Many people believe these monstrous spiders were born out of the Chernobyl disaster caused by radiation exposure that altered their genes. Were aliens involved in the Chernobyl disaster? Well, there's a conspiracy that says they very well may have been, but not in the way you're probably thinking. Instead of being blamed for the meltdown itself, extraterrestrial beings are rumored to have actually helped prevent an even worse catastrophe. The theory goes that when the disaster happened, aliens may have intervened to help contain the situation. Now, what is this actually based on? Well, nothing. One eyewitness, Mikhail Varitsky, reported seeing a strange fiery ball of light hovering above the reactor during the night of the accident. He described it as a glowing orb that hung in the air for a few minutes. In his exact words, "I and other people from my team went to the site of the blast at night. We saw a ball of fire and it was slowly flying in the sky. I think the ball was 6 or 8 meters in diameter. Then we saw 2 rays of crimson light stretching towards the 4th unit. The object was some 300 meters from the reactor. The event lasted for about 3 minutes. The lights of the object went out and it flew away in the northwestern direction." End quote. Some people think this may have been an alien craft, and this wasn't the only sighting either. There had apparently been a number of UFO sightings in the sky in the days leading up to the accident, so were extraterrestrials helping to manage the radiation and prevent it from spreading uncontrollably? Did the Bible predict the Chernobyl disaster? Well, some interpret a passage from the book of Revelation to be pretty eerily accurate to the events. There's a passage that talks about a great star falling from the sky and poisoning the water, and that star is called wormwood. Well, in Russian, Chernobyl translates to wormwood, which has led many to think the Bible was somehow foreshadowing the disaster. The exact passage goes as follows: "And the 3rd angel sounded the trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, burning as it were a torch, and it fell on the 3rd part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood, and the 3rd part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter." Now, aside from the wormwood thing, there are other similarities here. Firefighters at Chernobyl described the fires at Reactor 4 as burning like a torch, just like in the scripture, and the part about bitter waters could definitely be interpreted as the radiation seeping into local water, making it unsafe to drink. There's even a sculpture near Chernobyl showing an angel with a trumpet, created by a Ukrainian artist as a tribute to the firefighters and workers who risked their lives during the crisis. Up next, we have the tale of the scream. So in 1997, a nuclear physicist named Andrei Korsakov from the University of Buffalo had an eerie experience at the Chernobyl power plant. While visiting the site of Reactor 4, he reported hearing a faint but frantic voice screaming for help as he was taking radiation readings in the infamous Ground Zero area at around 7:30 in the morning. Now, after hearing the screams, Korsakov rushed back upstairs to tell the personnel what he heard, but to his shock, they told him that he was the first person to enter that restricted area in 3 years. The security protocols were strict, too. Entry required a password, handprint scan, and any unauthorized presence would trigger a whole whackload of alarms. So, who had been screaming?
Alright, it is time for number 6, the Boneless. The true story of the Boneless comes from the Shetland Islands, a group of small islands off the coast of Scotland, where the inhabitants were once terrorized by a ghostly blob. Yes, you heard that correctly. Stories about a ghostly apparition called the Boneless, and sometimes a frightening, have been whispered on the Shetland Island for years now. It's based on an account found in the book Shetland Traditional Lore by Jesse Saxby. Although no one could describe the apparition properly, people called it the Boneless because witnesses say it looked like a giant glowing white blob. Others said it looked like a jellyfish or a slimy white cloud. The Boneless would appear pressed up against windows and it never made a sound. It could move though. Apparently it could move faster than a dog. If you had happened to find yourself face to face with the Boneless, you would cower in fear and often die of fright. There's a story about one boy who was dragged by the Boneless to the edge of the cliff. He described it as smelling like rotting flesh. As he heard the waves crashing below, he grabbed the rocks and hung on for life. The Boneless rolled off the cliff and disappeared, and the boy managed to drag himself back to his home to tell his parents. Next, at number 5, we've got the haunting of Castle Stuart. The story goes like this. The Earl of Moray inherited Castle Stuart from his father. He wanted to rent it out, but he couldn't because the castle had such a bad reputation for being haunted. So the Earl tried to improve the castle's reputation by offering a reward to any man who was brave enough to spend the night in the castle. News about the reward spread, and eventually 4 men agreed. A minister, an elder in the Presbyterian church, a local shoemaker, and the last was a large man named Rob Angus. The deal was each of the men had to spend an entire night alone in a haunted room. Once they were inside, the door would be locked and wouldn't be unlocked until the next morning. The minister fell asleep in the room and had a dream about a blood-splattered man who sat down next to him. When he woke up, no one was there. The elder had a similar experience. While he was reading his Bible, the door to the room sprang open, and in walked a man covered in blood. The man drew his dagger on the elder, who fainted. He was found the next morning in complete shock. When it was the shoemaker's turn, he heard the door to the room open. A tall man with hooves for feet appeared in the doorway. The being jumped at the shoemaker and he fainted in terror. He was found unconscious on the floor the next morning. And lastly, it was Rob Angus's turn. Rob Angus was a big, strong Scotsman who said he wasn't afraid of anything. As the servant closed the door to his room, he said, "You will find me as I am, or dead." When the servant returned in the morning, the furniture in the room was broken and all over the place, but there was no sign of Rob. But then, the servant looked out the window and saw Rob Angus lying on the ground, dead. At some point, Rob Angus fell out of the window or was pushed. Various sightings and reports of paranormal activity over the years have given Castle Stuart the reputation of being one of the most haunted castles in the world.
Coming at number 4 now, guys, we have Arthur's Seat Coffin. Coming at number 4 now, guys, we have the Arthur's Seat Coffins. This one comes from Edinburgh. Arthur's Seat is a rocky hill there, sort of a landmark, if you will. One day in 1836, 5 local boys discovered an entrance to a small cave on the rugged northeastern face of that famous hill. There, they found some intricately carved miniature figures set in coffins. I know, that's incredibly creepy. The 17 coffins had actually been left undisturbed for an unknown amount of time. Each casket contained expertly carved human effigies, creepily dressed in very unique clothing. They had painted black boots on and twisted facial expressions. In the years since then, these creepy coffins have defied all attempts to explain them. This has opened the door to a number of creepy urban legends surrounding them. The most popular is that they were created to commemorate the 17 victims of the notorious Edinburgh murderers and grave robbers Burke and Hare. I'm no relation to that Burke though. Okay, maybe somewhere along the line. Awkward.
Getting close now, at number 3 we've got Sawney Bean, Scotland's most famous cannibal. Not much is known about Sawney Bean, but he was said to have been born in the late 15th century. He married a woman who was said to be a witch and moved to Benane Cave in Ayrshire with his new wife. Sawney supported his wife by being a robber, but rather than risk being caught, Sawney murdered his victims and disposed of the evidence by eating the remains. The couple started having children, a lot of them, 14 to be exact, and fed them a high protein diet of human flesh. Eventually the children grew up and had their own children born of incest, incest, and before long the cave was inhabited by an entire extended family of 48 cannibals, all with a taste for humans. The family remained undiscovered and would ambush unfortunate victims, steal their money, and eat them. Local authorities would find decaying body parts, sometimes pickled, washed up on the surrounding beaches. Eventually King James of Scotland heard about the Sawneys and orchestrated a 400-men manhunt. They found the cave, full of human remains and stolen valuables. Sawney Bean was reportedly executed for the mass murder of over 1,000 people, but most historians believe that Sawney never existed, and his story was nothing more than an urban legend.
Moving on to number 2 now, we have Gilly Doo. I think I'm pronouncing that right. In Scottish legend, he's a solitary Scottish male fairy that lives alone in the forest. He disguises himself in trees so as not to be seen by humans. His light green skin and long branch arms make it almost impossible for people to spot him. However, it's important to note that the Gilly Doo is usually only this elusive to adults. You see, he's been known to appear and interact with friendly children. Now you should know that doesn't mean that every interaction is a good one. He has been known to prey on people lost in the woods, killing or enslaving them. Perhaps the strangest thing I read about this creature is that he is said to collect the teeth of children to perform protective magic on them. This has led some people to believe that the Gilly Doo actually gave birth to the legend of the Tooth Fairy, a much lighter story. I think we can all agree. I don't think the Tooth Fairy has killed or enslaved anyone. If you know otherwise, let me know. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Mackenzie Poltergeist. This is perhaps the most famous ghost story in all of Scotland. The Black Mausoleum is the name of a tomb in Edinburgh's Greyfriars Cemetery and has become famous as the home of an evil paranormal entity. Over the years, visitors have reported feeling extreme hot spots and cold spots. They leave with cuts, bruises and burns on their body. Photographic evidence for the legend includes pictures of these injuries as well as pictures from inside the tomb that some claim show an unidentified shape. Others have reported seeing a white figure in the dark, smelling strange odours and hearing knocking noises under the ground and even from inside the tomb itself. If that wasn't enough for you, locals have gone to the grave some days to find dead animals in front of the Black Mausoleum. Some people have even claimed to have been possessed, which led to the grounds being exorcised twice, both unsuccessfully apparently. In the past few decades, it seems as though the Mackenzie Poltergeist has begun to spread. Poltergeist activity has been reported in 4 different houses around the graveyard, and in 2002 a large fire broke out in the residences behind George Mackenzie's tomb.
In 1996, a researcher named Vitaly Pravitsev looked into the possibility of the accident having been caused by an earthquake. People were pretty skeptical though. Experts pointed out over 80 discrepancies in his report, but then in 1997, a group of scientists from the United Institute of the Physics of the Earth took another look into this. They found that on the night of April 25th to the 26th, just 16 seconds before the reactor exploded, 3 nearby geological stations recorded a weak seismic event. So did an earthquake cause this disaster? And if so, was it natural or was there a possibility that it was intentional? Sounds crazy, but the idea of weaponized earthquakes isn't entirely out of the realm of possibility. During the Cold War, there were rumors that both the Soviet Union and the US were researching tectonic weapons. We don't know for sure if these weapons were actually ever developed or used, but some think they may have been, of course, in secret. I mean, even Nikola Tesla claimed to have created a device in 1898 that could produce earthquake-like effects. An article in Pravda, the former Soviet newspaper, claimed in 1992 that geophysical weapons were indeed developed, but the government denied this. Another conspiracy has to do with the KGB. The idea is that they wanted to sabotage Reactor 4 to scare other countries away from building their own nuclear power plants. The goal? To monopolize Europe's energy market entirely. The thinking goes like this: if Chernobyl created massive fear about nuclear energy, countries in Western and Central Europe would maybe think twice before investing in their own nuclear facilities. With limited energy sources in Europe, the KGB figured that if they could make these countries dependent on Soviet oil and gas, they'd be in a position of power. Of course, if you're going to look at the KGB having something to do with the incident, it's only natural for others to speculate about the US government as well. Ever since the disaster took place in 1986, there were suspicions that the CIA might have had something to do with it, which is not surprising in the slightest. This one's pretty obvious. The idea is that the CIA orchestrated the explosion at Reactor 4 to create fear around nuclear energy and destabilize the USSR's influence. It was a tense period of time for the Soviets and the United United States, and by creating a catastrophic event like this, the CIA could not only undermine the Soviet government's credibility, but also discourage other nations from developing nuclear power themselves, giving them the edge in the global energy market. Some were also highly skeptical of the rapid response of the US, thinking that they could have had a prior knowledge of the disaster. Now into more paranormal stuff. Like with any ghost town, especially one abandoned for such a tragic reason, ghost stories are plentiful. The amusement park has to be one of the eeriest spots in Pripyat. It was built just days before the disaster. It was meant to be a place of fun for families, but that never came to be. Sadly, it was never officially opened to the public, but legend has it that if you happen to be exploring Pripyat late at night, you may hear the faint sounds of laughter and music coming from the park. Visitors have reported strange occurrences while exploring. Some people say that when they approach the bumper cars, they can faintly hear the sounds of engines starting. Another creepy part about the park, and really the whole town itself, are the dolls scattered throughout it. Dolls that were left behind, now left to decay. Some believe that these dolls, especially those found in the carousel area, have taken on a life of their own. People have claimed that the dolls seem to change positions or appear in places they weren't before, but the giant rusted Ferris wheel is the most recognizable sight in the park. Some have said that when the wind blows, the wheel creaks and groans, sounding almost like whispers. It's not just the amusement park that's said to be haunted though. Urban explorers have reported seeing dark figures darting between buildings all throughout the city of Pripyat, especially in the empty schools and hospitals. Could these shadowy figures be the spirits of those who died in the disaster, still trapped in the abandoned city they once lived and worked in, forever doomed to roam the desolate streets? Some will say they've seen unexplained silhouettes peering out at them from corners of rooms or appearing just out of the corner of their eye. But are there actually shadowy entities trapped in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, or could people just be seeing things, either from psyching themselves out or having actual illusions brought on by the radioactivity? Now, the Black Bird of Chernobyl is probably the eeriest urban legend surrounding the Chernobyl disaster. The Black Bird of Chernobyl is a creepy urban legend that's come about in the years since the nuclear disaster in '86, but residents claimed to have seen the creature in the days leading up to it. It's often described as a big, dark figure, an enormous black owl or raven-looking thing. People claim to have spotted it flying around the Chernobyl power plant in the days leading up to the explosion. Not only that, but residents began having these horrific, vivid nightmares about it after spotting it. So what was this thing and why was it there? Well, the main theory is that the creature was an entity acting as a bad omen, a warning of the disaster to come, very similar to Mothman showing up in the Silver Bridge right before it collapsed. Some even think the Black Bird of Chernobyl and Mothman are the exact same creature.
Hidden deep in the jungles of Guyana is the legend of the Didi, a large, hairy, human-like creature that locals say stalks the forest. It's often compared to Bigfoot, but unlike North American stories, the Didi is described as more aggressive. Hunters in the region claim to have heard its guttural growls and seen huge footprints leading into dense brush. Some reports describe it stealing food from villages or chasing people who stray too far into the forest. Anthropologists think the Didi may come from cultural memories of giant sloths or encounters with unrecorded primates. Others dismiss it as a story told to keep children from wandering off into dangerous areas. But the number of consistent sightings across generations make the Didi one of the eeriest legends from South America's lesser-known jungles. Picture this. You're trekking through the Sumatran jungle when you catch sight of a small figure covered in hair darting between trees. This is the orang pendek, which translates to short person. It's described as a human-like primate about 3 to 5 feet tall, walking upright on 2 legs. For more than a century, explorers, Dutch colonists, and modern researchers have reported seeing it. In the 1920s, a Dutch settler even swore he saw it cross a path just a few feet ahead of him. Scientists have suggested it might be an undiscovered primate species, or even a surviving relative of early humans. Regardless of what it is, stories of the orang pendek have never gone away. Expeditions as recently as the early 2000s collected footprints and hair samples that some say point to a real, unknown species living in Sumatra's jungles. In Zambia and parts of the Congo, people talk about a flying creature with leathery wings, sharp teeth, and a wingspan reaching 6 feet across. It is called the Kongamato, which means overturner of boats. According to legend, it swoops down on rivers and attacks fishermen, tearing at their boats with its claws. Eyewitnesses describe it as looking like a living pterosaur, the prehistoric flying reptiles thought to have died out millions of years ago. Some colonial-era explorers in the early 1900s even collected stories from locals who insisted they had seen and fought with the beast. While skeptics say it could be large bats or even storks, the consistency of the reports over generations have kept this legend alive. The very idea of a prehistoric predator still lurking in remote jungles terrifies even seasoned explorers. Imagine camping in the highland forests of Kenya and waking in the night to the sound of heavy footsteps circling your tent. The creature blamed for this is the Nandi bear, also called chemosit. Locals describe it as a huge hyena-like beast with a sloping back, thick fur, and a vicious appetite. Stories say it attacks the heads of its victims, leaving the rest of the body behind. While no physical evidence has ever been found, the legend is so deeply ingrained in Kenyan folklore that colonial hunters in the 1900s launched expeditions just to find it. Some think this bear may have been based on sightings of giant prehistoric hyenas that once roamed Africa. Others say it is just a misidentified large hyena. Either way, the idea of a night-stalking predator that preys only on the head is enough to keep people wary of the dark forests. Deep in the jungles of Vietnam, Laos, and Borneo, there are stories of a hairy, human-like creature called the batutut. American soldiers during the Vietnam War claimed to have seen them, describing them as muscular, covered in hair, and about 6 feet tall. Villagers, however, have been telling stories of this creature for centuries. They are said to walk upright, live in remote areas, and sometimes raid crops or livestock. Some anthropologists think these stories might be cultural memories of earlier human species like Homo erectus, while others argue they are simply misidentified animals. Yet the consistency of the sightings, especially during modern conflict like the Vietnam War, has kept the legend alive. The thought of soldiers in the middle of combat running into something unexplained in the jungle only adds to the creepiness. Few legends are more disturbing than the one about the Yakumama. In the Amazon basin, locals fear a massive serpent said to be over 100 feet long. Its name means mother of the water, and according to legend, it lurks in rivers and lakes, creating whirlpools to suck in its prey. Some explorers in the 1900s reported hearing strange booming noises underwater that locals insisted were the Yakumama calling out. Cryptozoologists suggest the legend may have come from sightings of massive anacondas, which can reach lengths of over 20 feet. While no confirmed snake longer than that has ever been reported, rumors of truly gigantic ones persist. The very idea of something that massive silently gliding beneath murky jungle waters is enough to keep anyone from swimming too far out. Not all jungle legends involve giant beasts. Some are about small, eerie figures. Across Central and South America, people tell stories of the duende, little goblin-like creatures that live in forests and jungles. They are usually described as small, humanoid, and mischievous, sometimes helping lost travelers, but more often luring them deeper into danger. Spanish colonists in the 16th century reported hearing about duendes from indigenous people, and the legend spread widely. In Belize, they are said to kidnap people who wander into the forest alone. In other countries, they whistle to confuse travelers, and some historians think that the duende legend may be a cultural way of warning people about the dangers of wandering off alone in thick forests. But for those who swear they've seen them, the duende are very real and very disturbing. In the rainforests of Java, villagers speak of a terrifying bat-like creature called the ahul. Its wings are said to stretch over 10 feet wide, and its cry echoes through the trees at night. The Ahul is described as looking like a massive bat or even a flying primate with leathery wings. In 1925, a Dutch naturalist claimed he saw a huge bat-like animal near a river in West Java, sparking interest in the legend outside Indonesia. Some scientists argue it could be sightings of giant owls or fruit bats, but locals insist the Ahul is something far more sinister. To them, it's a predator that swoops down from the jungle canopy, hunting at night. The thought of a giant, bloodthirsty bat gliding silently over the treetops has made the Ahul one of Southeast Asia's most unsettling jungle creatures. In the jungles of Veracruz and Oaxaca in Mexico, people speak of the cheneque, forest spirits that are said to guard nature. They are described as small, elf-like beings that can trick travelers and lead them astray. What makes the legend so unsettling is that people claim encounters with them leave victims sick or mentally disoriented, sometimes for weeks. Anthropologists trace the legend back to the Totonac and Nawa mythology, where they were guardians of the earth. Even today, reports of people hearing laughter or seeing small figures vanish into the jungle continue. For locals, it's not just a myth. They leave offerings to these creatures to stay safe in the forests, proof that this disturbing legend still has power. In the mid-1990s, reports began to pour out of Puerto Rico about a strange creature attacking livestock at night. Farmers would wake up to find goats, chickens, and even cattle drained of blood with small puncture wounds on their necks. The culprit, according to locals, was the chupacabra, which literally means goat sucker. Descriptions of the creature vary, but many say it has red glowing eyes, spines along its back, and walks on two legs. What makes this legend disturbing is that the reports quickly spread across Latin America, especially in Mexico, where villagers swore they had seen the creature lurking in jungle-like terrain near farms. Scientists suggest the attacks were caused by wild dogs or even mange-ridden coyotes, but the eerie consistency of the wounds and the sheer number of eyewitness accounts turned the chupacabra into one of the most famous cryptids in history. Even today, locals warn about it, and strange livestock killings are still sometimes blamed on this blood-sucking creature. There is a stretch of road near Monterrey that locals avoid after midnight. Drivers report their engines stalling, radios turning on by themselves, and a tall figure appearing in the road ahead. The legend says this road was built over land used for executions during the Mexican Revolution. Prisoners were lined up and shot, their bodies buried where they fell. In the 1970s, several fatal accidents occurred on that same stretch. Survivors claimed they swerved to avoid hitting a man who suddenly appeared in front of their vehicle, a man who vanished the moment they crashed. Traffic authorities installed lighting and signage, but accidents continued. Eventually, locals named it El Camino del Diablo. Taxi drivers still refuse late-night fares that require using that road. The legend says he looks like a gentleman, but if you accept his help, you pay for it. El Charro is one of Mexico's most recognizable night road legends. He appears as a tall, elegant man in a perfect black suit, usually riding a massive black horse. He shows up when you are alone, tired, broke, desperate, or all of the above, and he offers exactly what you want: a ride home, money, a shortcut, a job, relief. But the deal is never free. In many versions, El Charro is tied to the devil, or at least to a force that functions like it. He is not just a scary rider, he is a test. The greedy, the reckless, and the people who make desperate bargains are the ones who end up in trouble. This is why the legend is so Mexican in its cultural bones. The Charro is a national symbol. The horseman should represent pride, skill, tradition. The legend flips it and says sometimes the most familiar outfit is the best disguise. The dark origin here is not just religion, it is the reality of travel. For centuries, roads at night were dangerous. Bandits, accidents, getting lost, getting stranded. If a stranger offered you help, you had to make a choice fast, and if you chose wrong, you might not make it home. El Charro is basically that decision turned into a character, and the detail people love adding is the moment the mask slips. Sometimes you see his boots, and they're not boots. Sometimes you notice notice his horse is too tall, too still, like it's carved out of shadow. Sometimes you realize you cannot remember where you first saw him, and the moment you say yes, the legend says you stop being a person on a road. You become a lesson. The worst part about a Nawal is not what it turns into, it's that it might already be someone you know. This is one of the deepest, oldest ideas in Mesoamerican belief. Depending on the region and the version, these can be a human with a spiritual animal companion, or a person who can transform into an animal, or a ritual specialist feared for being able to harm or heal in ways that feel impossible. In rural storytelling, these people are often blamed when something weird happens at night. Strange animal sounds that feel too intelligent, a dog that stares too long, a turkey that follows you, a coyote that does not run when you shout. The legend fills in the gap and says that this is not an animal, that is a person wearing an animal. Colonial records and scholarship show that belief in these shape-shifting accusations were taken seriously enough to be discussed in legal and religious contexts. This was not just campfire material. It tied into fears about idolatry, witchcraft accusations, and community conflict. So the legend has layers. There is a shop window in Chihuahua where people don't just look at the mannequin. They stare like they're waiting for proof. La Pascualita is a legendary bridal mannequin displayed in Chihuahua, famous for looking so lifelike that people swear it cannot be a mannequin. The legend claims it is actually a preserved human body placed in the window after a tragedy. That claim has never been proven, and that uncertainty is part of why the story keeps breathing. In this case, the detail is in the hands. People talk about the skin tone, the nails, the realism. Some say the eyes even look wet. Others claim she changes position slightly, or that the staff refuse to touch her directly when they change the dress. So if you visit, the legend says you do not tap the glass, you do not joke about her, and if you think she blinked, you do not tell anyone you were alone when it happened. Imagine waking up in a hospital at night and the kindest nurse you've ever met is someone no one else can find. La Planchada is a famous Mexico City hospital legend often linked to Hospital Juarez. She is described as a nurse with an impeccably pressed uniform who appears late at night, checks on patients, brings comfort, and then vanishes before anyone can thank her. There are many versions of her backstory, but the common thread is heartbreak and duty. A nurse who was devoted to her work, who experienced betrayal or loss, and who returned after death still doing what she believed she was born to do. Mexican media retellings openly describe it as legend, and the story persists in part because hospitals are the perfect environment for it. The dark origin here is human. Hospitals at night are lonely. People are afraid. Staff are exhausted. Patients are half asleep, medicated, and disoriented, and sometimes a stranger really does help you, but you never learn their name. That's the real-life gap the legend crawls into. In the late 1990s, people across Mexico started waking up to dead livestock, and one name spread faster than any explanation: Chupacabras. El Chupacabras is a modern Mexican urban legend powerhouse. The name and earliest wave of reports are often traced back to Puerto Rico in 1995, but the legend rapidly spread into Mexico and became part of rural and national conversation. The classic story is always the same shape. Animals are found dead with strange puncture marks. People say there's no blood. People say the creature was seen near the pen moving weird with spines, or like a hairless dog, or like something that shouldn't exist. Then the fear multiplies because nobody agrees on what it looked like, only that it was there. What makes this a true urban legend is how it behaves socially. It spreads through communities as a warning, it creates a shared enemy, it gives a label to something frightening and unexplained, and even today major references describe it as folklore, while also noting that later sightings are often explained by animals with severe mange or other diseases. And here is the final creepy detail that people swear by. They say the Chupacabras doesn't just take animals, it takes sleep. Because once you believe it's out there, you start listening at night for every sound in the brush, every rustle, every distant bark, and your mind just does the rest. In Durango, there's an old legend of a bride who appears near abandoned churches. Witnesses describe a woman in a wedding dress standing silently by the roadside. When approached, her face is smooth and blank, like skin stretched over nothing. The legend originates from reports in the early 1900s of a woman who died waiting for a groom who never arrived. She was buried in her wedding dress. Travelers claimed encounters for decades. Several car accidents were attributed to drivers swerving to avoid her. And whether psychological or something else, the consistency of reports across generations makes this one of Mexico's most persistent forgotten legends. If you see a doll hanging from a tree in Xochimilco, it might not be there to scare you. It might be there as an offering. The canals of Xochimilco are part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site tied to the historic center of Mexico City, with the Chinampa landscape recognized for its cultural significance. Within the real protected environment, there is a place that became globally infamous, Isla de las Muñecas, the Island of the Dolls. The verified core is that a man lived and worked in the area and became associated with an island covered in dolls over many years. Accounts of how and why vary, and that is where the legend takes over. Many tell it's a response to a drowned young person. Some versions claim his own death mirrored that story. The urban legend is that the dolls move, blink, or whisper, especially when the wind changes. Some say you should bring a doll if you visit, not as a souvenir, but as respect. And here is the dark origin. Even if you remove the paranormal, this is an environment shaped by tradition and survival, and a man's private fears or grief became a public spectacle. People call it haunted because that is easier than saying a person spent decades building a protective wall out of broken faces. Some museums feel educational. This one feels like you've accidentally walked into a room where the dead were not done being looked at. Guanajuato's famous mummies are real human remains, many dating back to the 1800s, preserved by local conditions and later displayed. Even in modern reporting, the key facts repeat. Bodies were exhumed after burial fees went unpaid, the remains were displayed for decades, and there are ongoing disputes over handling, conservation, and who should control them. That modern controversy matters because it feeds the legend. The urban myth says some of the mummies screamed when exhumed, and that a curse follows people who mock them or treat them like props. A lot of this likely comes from the unsettling appearance of naturally preserved bodies and the way tourism can blur into disrespect. The factual dark origin is not magic. It is economics, burial policy, and the ethics of display. When you put real human remains behind glass for entertainment, people will reach for supernatural language to explain the discomfort they cannot otherwise name. Mixquic is famous for its Day of the Dead celebrations, but locals also speak of something else. According to legend, certain graves are guarded by spirits who do not appreciate visitors after dark. People who entered the cemetery late reported being chased out by unseen forces. Some claimed hands grabbed their ankles, others said the exits moved, trapping them inside. In the 1980s, police records note multiple injuries caused by falls and panic inside the cemetery at night. While authorities blame alcohol and poor lighting, residents insisted something else was at work. Even during celebrations, locals warn outsiders to leave before midnight.
Number 8. Pripyat, Ukraine. Pripyat is a small town in northern Ukraine that was the closest town to the notorious Chernobyl power plant. Once upon a time, Pripyat was a nice little town that was home to 50,000 people. However, after the Chernobyl disaster, everything changed. Needless to say, no one lives here today, and it's dangerous to visit even after all these years after the explosion. Now, there are many ghost stories surrounding Pripyat. One story is that one of the nuclear physicists was measuring the radiation readings when he heard someone screaming inside the plant. This event happened in 1997, 11 years after the explosion. He asked the employees about it, and they told him that he was the first one to enter the control room in 11 years, and that the only way to get in was through a thick metal door. Now, even if someone did come inside, they would inevitably trigger an alarm that goes off. Even more interestingly, later that evening, the employees saw a floodlight turning on in the installation room. They thought there may have been a power surge, but seconds later, the lights were turned off. Spooky. Number 7. Castle Rizal, Poland. This red structure looming over Rizal has had a horrifying dark past. The town was burnt down in the 1800s, and a woman named Barbara Zdunk was arrested for committing arson and was later accused of witchcraft. In the castle, she was tortured and taken advantage of on multiple occasions and eventually gave birth to 2 children. Many people claim that the ghost of Barbara and her children haunt the castle today, and rightfully so. A strange smell of perfume was reported in the castle on multiple occasions, doors that were previously locked were found open the next morning, and some people even claim that they were touched by a strange force in the castle. Number 6. Witch's Castle, Austria. Witch's Castle, also known as Musham Castle, has a gruesome history. Hundreds of people were imprisoned, tortured, and had their lives ended inside these walls during the witch hunts of 1675 and 1690. Those who did escape the hangings had their hands cut off, while others were branded by hot irons. Now, after the witch hunting was over, they went back to normal. But then came another issue: werewolves. In the 1800s, many cattle and deer were found dead near the castle. So these people jumped to the logical conclusion that this was being done by werewolves. This led to some residents being tried and executed in the castle's dungeons as the full moon culprits. Staff and visitors swear they have felt someone's breath on them, been touched, heard banging sounds, footsteps, and doors slamming, and there's also been rumors of people hearing the sounds of the witches screaming, and werewolves apparently still prowl the grounds. Number 5. The Houska Castle, Czech Republic. The Houska Castle is located in a forest north of Prague and is one of the most haunted places in the world. According to the legend, on this exact spot, there was a huge hole in the ground which was considered to be the gateway to hell. Nice. Paranormal activities were disturbing the region, and the Bohemians thought they would solve their problems if they covered the hole, which honestly sounds like a good idea. That's why they built the castle. Now, no one actually wanted to build this castle and get close to this portal, so they used prisoners to help. Hundreds of prisoners were forced to go into the pit to build the foundation for the castle. However, when they were taken out of the hole, they looked like old men. Later on, this castle was the center of a sermon German occult dabbling during World War II, and multiple dead bodies of German soldiers were found on the site. Witnesses reported several different forms of paranormal activities, and some even claimed that the site contains the remains of a demonic beast who escaped the pit. Yeah, no thank you, I'm good. Number 4. Dracula's Castle in Bran, Romania. Bran Castle is a castle in Romania that is a national monument and landmark in Transylvania. It's commonly known outside Transylvania as Dracula's Castle because it's the only castle in all of Transylvania that actually fits Bram Stoker's description of Dracula's castle, even though he never visited Romania. Many historians agree that Vlad III, Dracula, never set foot in Castle Bran, which was neither a friendly place for him to visit nor under his rule. Nonetheless, the castle is still creepy. The castle has 57 rooms and, of course, a secret passage. While being beautiful during the day, the castle takes on a whole other look at night. In the villages near Bran, there is a belief of the existence of evil spirits called ghosts or stigoi. Until half a century ago, it was believed that there existed certain living people who were leading normal life during the day, but during their sleep at midnight, their souls left their bodies and haunted the village, tormenting people in their sleep. So yeah, I'd stay away from this castle at midnight. Number 3. The Edinburgh Vaults, Scotland. The Edinburgh Vaults are a series of chambers formed in the 19 arches of the South Bridge in Edinburgh. They were a part of the South Bridge Act 1785 and was completed in 1788. For around 30 years, the vaults were used to house taverns, workshops for cobblers and other tradesmen, as well as storage space for said merchants. In later years, the vaults were a hotspot for the homeless and for criminal activities such as illegal gambling taverns, illegal whiskey distillery, and body snatchers stored corpses there overnight. In the late 19th century, the vaults were closed off, but opened again in 1988 when a local man crawled through a narrow passageway in one of his buildings and rediscovered the rooms underneath the bridge. Witnesses claim they can feel cold gusts of air, to hear voices, and see and sense an intangible presence. Now, some ghosts are bolder there, like Jack, who grabs visitors' hands in the wine vault. Another, more menacing presence is known as Mr. Boots, an unkept man so named for his tall boots. Now, Mr. Boots lurks in the back section of the vault and has been known to push and throw rocks at visitors. Some have claimed to hear his footsteps on the cobbles and his echoing voice cursing throughout the chambers. Number 2. The Old Vicarage, Sweden. Borgvattna is a small village in northern Sweden. It only has 50 residents, a church, and a vicarage. That old vicarage is extremely extremely haunted, perhaps the most haunted place in Sweden. In 1930, the owner saw a lady dressed in gray at the house. She was walking slowly towards him through the big hall, but decided to take a turn into the expedition room, the office where the vicars used to work. He wanted to talk to her, ask her what she was doing inside his house, but when he got to the expedition room, there was no one there. A couple moved in 1936, and they heard footsteps walking through the house, and doors were opening and closing as if someone was moving from one room to another. When they wanted to welcome the visitor, they saw nobody. The wife was home alone one day when she heard music coming from there behind a closed door. She opened the kitchen door and the music suddenly stopped. The same thing happened later when her husband was back home. Then in 1945, another man moved in and he brought a rocking chair. One night when he read a book in it, he was pushed off the chair so violently that he fell to the ground. When he tried again, it was as if he was blocked from it and he fell again. Then the rocking chair also started moving on its own. Now each room has its own little story, with guests reporting seeing shadows, hearing furniture move, and much more. And coming in at number 1 is Dragslund Castle, Denmark. This 13th century castle was built by former bishop of Roskilde and has been leveled by invading Swedish armies and rebuilt several times. During the Reformation, the castle was seized by the Danish king, who laid claim to all church properties. The bishop was imprisoned in the castle and left to die. Guests claim to hear moaning and wailing in the area of the castle's prison cells. Another lingering prisoner still haunts the grounds, the Earl of Bothwell, husband of Queen Mary of Scots. He was captured in Norway, imprisoned, and tortured to death in the castle. It's said that his spirit appears in the courtyard riding a horse-drawn carriage. 2 female ghosts also haunt the castle, a lady in white and a lady in gray. The first is the ghost of a nobleman's daughter who fell in love with a castle worker. Her father forbade the relationship and ended her life for not obeying his demands. He chained her to a post in the castle cellar and built a brick wall around her. A skeleton was found when the castle was modernized, lending truth to the legend. The second ghost is an old woman who died after castle doctors removed an infected tooth. While it relieved her pain, the extraction was infected, causing her death.
And we're kicking off this list with the Scandinavian Ganganger. Ganganger, that's a hard word to say. Might be mispronouncing it. Originating in the folklore of Scandinavia, particularly Norway and Sweden, the Ganganger is believed to be the embodiment of a deceased individual who returns from the grave to haunt the living. These spectral beings typically manifest with a pale complexion, dressed in tattered burial garments. They're often associated with unfinished business or unresolved grievances, seeking retribution or closure. It kind of sounds like a normal ghost, but they actually are very different. Legend has it that encountering one of these beings brings great misfortune and even death to those who cross its path. Instead of just appearing in the background of photographs or whispering incoherent sentences into spirit boxes like your regular old vanilla ghosts, the Ganganger are malicious spirits that can actually cause physical harm. The mere sight of these spectral beings is said to invoke a profound sense of dread and foreboding, as they are believed to possess this malevolent intent, even towards loved ones. Efforts to ward off or appease one of these beings have been present in Scandinavian folklore for centuries. Traditional rituals like offering prayers, performing protective charms, or conducting burial rites were believed to provide some defense against their haunting presence. At number 9, we have A Letter from a Blind Man. This one is short, but man, is it chilling. A dark tale that began circulating just after one of the darkest periods in modern history. In post-World War II in Berlin, a time plagued by scarcity, poverty, and hunger, a tale spoke of a young woman who encountered a blind man navigating his way through a bustling crowd. The two ended up striking a conversation, leading the man to ask if she could deliver a letter to the specified address on the envelope for him. Considering it was conveniently on her route home, she agreed to help. As she turned to walk away though, she craned her head back momentarily to see if there was anything else she could assist the blind man with, and to her astonishment, she caught sight of him hastily making his way through the crowd without his dark glasses or his white cane. Understandably, she was pretty suspicious at this point and headed over to report the incident to the authorities. The police police swiftly raided the address mentioned in the letter, where they uncovered a gruesome discovery. In the home were piles of human flesh intended for sale, and within the envelope entrusted to the young woman was a chilling message that read, "This is the last one I'm sending you today."
Next up at number 5 now, we have Provan Hall. Many people in Glasgow will know this as one of the oldest buildings in the city. It was built as a hunting lodge for the bishops of Glasgow in 1471. That's more than 20 years before Christopher Columbus set sail. For all you history buffs out there trying to get your head around the dates, it's a pretty old building. It has played host to some distinguished guests as well, including Mary Queen of Scots and her father, King James V. Ghosts have been reported at the hall ever since those days. Locals say they've seen spirits of murderers and also their victims. The master bedroom is said to be haunted by a man with a dagger. They say that in the 19th century he came home from 2 years at war to find his wife had had a baby with another man. In a fit of rage, he stabbed her to death and then slit his own throat. Another less violent ghost that's been seen is that of Reston Mathers. He was a previous owner of the hall who is often seen on the staircase. He died there in 1934 after breathing problems and is said to always be dressed in a black bowler hat and sporting a bright white beard. Next up, number 4 now, we have the Green Lady of Crathis Castle. Many people know of the Green Lady of Crathis Castle, a forlorn spirit that has been seen by an alarming amount of people over the years. The castle was built in the 16th century, and despite its grand size, the Green Lady is only ever seen in one room. She paces back and forth in front of the fireplace there, sometimes cradling an infant in her arms. Apparently, even Queen Victoria herself saw the spectre while staying in the castle one night. Some say that in life the apparition was a servant girl who fell pregnant out of wedlock and mysteriously disappeared soon after. For a while, this was just dismissed as nonsense, but in the 1800s, a grisly discovery was made. While renovating a fireplace, some workmen uncovered the skeletal remains of a woman and child. Even that story has now been lost in the sands of time, but the legend of the Green Lady lives on. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the Dalmarnock Bridge suicide ghost. Even without the ghost, the Gothic style and age of this bridge leaves a stark image in visitors' minds. There has been a bridge on this site going way back to 1821, spanning across the River Clyde. It's also known for a harrowing suicide story. They say that years ago, a man jumped to his death from the bridge. He was 30 years old with short hair, wearing a blue 3/4 length coat and black trousers. In the years since then, many people have reported seeing his ghostly apparition jump to its death over and over again. Moving on to number 2 now, we have the Kelpsie. These are perhaps some of the most feared and famous creatures in Scottish folklore. Most accounts describe these creatures as shapeshifters that often take the form of a horse. When they appear in human male form, they are often very hairy. They jump out at lone travelers on deserted roads and crush their victims to death. If they appear in human female form, their behavior is altogether different. They take the form of a beautiful woman and lure men to their deaths in the water, much like the sirens that we've talked about in other cultures' urban legend videos. In horse form, they're perhaps even more dangerous though. It's said that they entice people to climb on their back for a ride, only to drown them. What's even more twisted is that they apparently target children in particular. Many centuries ago, people in Scotland would be wary of dark or white ponies that appear to be lost. They feared they were kelpies that would take them to a watery grave. One way to spot a kelpie from a normal horse was that kelpies had dripping manes, a sign that they had recently come from water. When a kelpie's tail entered water, it made a sound like thunder, a sure sign to stay indoors as a kelpie was on the prowl. And finally, at number 1 now, we have the Flannan Isles Lighthouse Mystery. These isles are a group of uninhabited rocks off the coast of mainland Scotland. One of the islands is called Eileen Moor and features a grass hill at its highest point. On top of that lies Flannan Isles Lighthouse. A year after it was built, on December 7th, 1900, the new lighthouse keepers arrived. They were Donald MacArthur, Thomas Marshall and James Ducat. The inspector made sure they were okay and then left. Soon after, the island became enveloped in a thick, rolling fog. The inspectors couldn't see the lighthouse from the mainland because of this fog. A ship that went by a week later reported that the lighthouse was not shining its light. After a full 3 weeks, the lighthouse had still not been seen and the men had not returned from their rotation on the island. A rescue ship found that the island was empty. The lighthouse was locked. The clock on the wall had stopped and there was a cooked meal just sat on the table. The last entry in the log had been made almost 2 weeks before. Authorities concluded they were swept away by a storm, but locals had maintained something supernatural happened on that island and that the fog had something to do with it.
Starting things off at number 10, we've got the Gorbals vampire. Back in September of 1954, the children from Gorbals in Glasgow went on a monster hunt looking for the creature that killed their 2 friends and drank their blood. For 3 nights, hundreds of children between 4 and 14 carried knives, stakes, clubs, and crucifixes and stormed into the creepy necropolis graveyard known locally as the City of the Dead. They were hunting a vampire that was said to be 7 feet tall with blood-red eyes and sharp iron teeth. The children called him the Gorbals vampire. This was actually a real event. On September 23rd, Constable Alex Deeprose was called to the City of the Dead because of a disturbance and found hundreds of armed kids looking for a vampire. Local news outlets picked up the story. Headlines said things like "Amazing scene as hundreds of children rush cemetery." But the report about the 2 missing children ended up being false. The police heard of no missing children reports at the time. The Gorbals vampire was dismissed as an urban legend, and some say the kids were inspired by American comic books like Tales from the Crypt and The Vault of Horror.
Alright, next up at number 9 now guys, we have the Devils in the Bins. The House of the Bins is an old Scottish ancestral home. General Tam Dalyell was the head of the Dalyell family in the 17th century. Now while he lived there, Tam claimed that every night the devil visited him in his home for a game of cards. He said the devil usually won. Now in retrospect, this might have been a good thing. You see, one night the devil appeared as usual, and as usual the devil and Tam sat down to play cards. This night was different though. This night, for the first time ever, Tam seemed to be getting the upper hand. He was winning. As the game went on, the devil got more and more angry about this. Eventually, when the game looked lost for him, he flew into a rage. The devil then threw a single marble at Tam. It missed and instead landed in the sergeant's pond outside the house. Now for many years people laughed at Tam and dismissed his story as insane. Then, over 200 years later, the pond outside was apparently drained, and what should they find buried in the mud at the bottom but a single shiny marble?
He lost his marble! One marble. One marble? At number 8, we've got Abandoned Annie. The City Chambers is a famous building in Edinburgh, with ancient alleys that run beneath. The streets below the City Chambers are said to be haunted, and they attract psychics, ghost hunters, and mediums. This is because back in the 16th and 17th centuries, this particular area of Edinburgh was hit extremely hard by the plague. The streets used to be littered with bodies and sick people who were banished and left for dead. After the 18th century, the abandoned homes and alleys were sealed, but that doesn't stop people from venturing down there. There have been many strange noises and sightings reported, but most notably a psychic claims to have come into contact with the ghost of a young girl named Annie. Abandoned Annie is a story that began in 1992 after a Japanese psychic called Eiko Gibo went to the close as a part of a documentary on paranormal activity. When the group were touring the area, she came across a room that she at first was too afraid to enter. She said the room had a terrible feeling of sickness, hunger, and cold. But then Eiko went inside the room because she said she was invited by the ghost of a little girl named Annie who had died of the plague. Annie grabbed her hand and said that she had been abandoned by her family and that she had lost her doll. Eiko later went back to the room with a Barbie for Annie to play with, and since then, visitors to Annie's room are told to bring a gift for her. There is now a pile of toys created by people who have visited her room. To this day, people report feeling sick, uneasy, and cold while visiting Annie's room, despite the fact that there is no historical record of any girl named Annie, and the story has been dismissed as a popular urban myth. An urban myth that actually has a happy purpose, apparently. Along with toys, people leave money for Annie, and at the end of every year, the money is counted and given to the sick kids hospital. So far, Annie has raised more than £45,000 for other sick children.
Next up at number 7 now guys, we have the A75. Now that is the name of what's said to be the most haunted road in Scotland bar none. It runs through the county of Dumfriesshire and has been a hub of reports of supernatural activity over the years. It's actually attracted paranormal investigators to it from all over the world. Kathleen Crone is the founder of Mostly Ghostly, great name by the way. Now she said there have been screaming hags, eyeless phantoms, and a menagerie of unearthly creatures witnessed on this famous road. In 1962, perhaps one of the most famous sightings occurred on the road. Derek and Norman Ferguson were driving along the road when a large hen apparently flew into the windscreen of their car. They then saw huge cats and other monstrous creatures pass by by them, as well as a phantom furniture van, whatever that is, all of which vanished into thin air. In the years since then, the number of stories has grown to the point where some truck drivers actually avoid the A75 altogether.
In 2004, a woman using the name Hasume made a post on the Japanese forum 2channel while sitting on a train late at night. Other passengers were asleep. This was her normal commute to work, but the train hadn't stopped in a long time. Stations were being skipped and no announcements were being made. Hasume tried to contact the conductor or driver but couldn't get a response. Unsure what else to do, she posted online asking for advice. People started replying as she gave updates in real time. After about an hour, the train finally stopped. Hasume stepped onto an empty platform. The station sign read Kisaragi Station. There were no staff. The train departed, leaving her alone. She stayed at the station and continued posting. Users quickly searched online and told her there was no station by the name anywhere in Japan, and urged her to leave immediately. Hasume walked outside and tried to find a taxi, but no dice. She eventually found a phone booth and called their parents, asking them to pick her up. They tried, but of course, they had no idea where Kisaragi Station was. As time passed, Hasume described the area as deeply unsettling. She could hear a bell tolling somewhere nearby, along with a drum beat that slowly grew louder. Deciding she couldn't stay there, she started walking along the train tracks to escape. While following the tracks, a voice suddenly shouted from behind her, "Hey, don't walk on the track, it's dangerous." When Hasume turned around, she saw a man. He only had one leg. For a moment she was relieved though, he'd be able to tell her where the hell she was, but then he vanished into thin air. Panicking, she ran into a nearby tunnel and injured herself along the way. After reaching the other side, a man greeted her and offered to help. The two returned to Kisaragi Station and boarded another train. This train carried them into a remote area of the Japanese Alps. At first the man was speaking normally, but then he slowly became incoherent, began muttering nonsense, and then fell silent. Hasume made one final post. "My battery's almost run out. Things are getting strange, so I think I'm gonna make a run for it." And that was the last anyone heard from her. This next one is called Gozu, the Cowhead Story. It's a story about a story. The story in question is said to be so terrifying that hearing it all the way through can kill you. At best, you'll be in a state of shock, unable to speak for the rest of your life. In some versions, listeners die days later in accidents after hearing it. Now, the most common version involves a teacher telling students a scary story on a bus or during class. Halfway through, the teacher realizes what he's saying and tries to stop, but it's too late. The teacher gets locked into this trance, unable to stop telling the story. When help arrives, the bus is wrecked or the class is unresponsive, with the teacher and students in a total daze, unable to speak, barely able to move. But what is this utterly terrifying story that puts listeners in a state of shock and utter terror? Nobody knows. This is that classic example that some of the scariest horror touches on the fear of the unknown, the unexplainable. Even Japanese horror writers have commented on it, saying the fear comes from suggestion. It's been referenced in Japanese literature and media as early as the 20th century. Late at night, on quiet roads, drivers in parts of Japan have reported a motorcycle coming up behind them. When the bike pulls alongside, the driver is horrified when they realize the biker has no head. In some versions of the legend, the rider is searching for his missing head. In others, he's looking for the person who caused his death. A few stories say he rides next to cars, matching their speed, tapping on their windows, or daring the driver to look straight at him. If they do, crashes are said to follow not long after. The legends seem to come about after the Australian film Stone in 1974. There's a scene in the movie where a rider's head is lobbed off after running into a wire stretched across the road. When the movie reached Japan in 1981, stories about headless riders started spreading alongside real stories of motorcycle accidents. There are also more ordinary explanations. A rider in a dark full-face helmet on an unlit road can look headless at the right angle. And some Japanese bikers have even admitted to wearing non-reflective black helmets on purpose just to mess with drivers. And next we have the legend of Turbo Granny, which doesn't sound scary in the slightest. And the fact that this is a Japanese story, it's kind of making me picture a huge mech robot in the form of an old lady, but the tale is actually much creepier. The story goes that if you're driving on mountain roads late at night, especially in rural areas, you might see an elderly woman running beside your car. At first you assume it's your eyes playing tricks on you, but then you speed up and she keeps pace. Some versions say she can run over 100 kilometers per hour. Others say she rides in the back of your car, laughing and tapping on your trunk and windows. If you stop, she'll just catch up. If you don't, accidents tend to happen. Drivers report engines stalling, steering locking, or tires blowing out right as she appears. Turbo Granny became popular in the 80s and 90s when car culture really exploded in Japan and young drivers were racing through mountain passes at night. She became a kind of roadside ghost story. Some versions say she's the spirit of an old woman killed by a car. Others say she's always existed, attached to roads where people often die. Hanako-sen is one of the first ghost stories Japanese kids ever hear, which might be why it never really leaves them. She's said to haunt school bathrooms, usually on the 3rd floor, 3rd stall. Knock 3 times and ask if she's there. Sometimes she answers, sometimes she comes out. The details change depending on the area. In some versions she's harmless, in others she drags people into the toilet where they're never seen again. As for her origin story, some say she died in World War II during air raids while hiding in the school. Another version says she was being followed by a man, and the bathroom is where she was hiding when she was killed. There's something so unsettling about the idea of a ghost haunting a bathroom stall. I think it's the vulnerability of it, when you're literally being caught with your pants down. Back in the late 70s, people in Japan weren't just talking about this one, they were scared enough that schools sent kids home in groups, and police departments made public statements about it. Kuchisaki Onna, or the slit-mouthed woman. The story goes like this. A woman approaches you in the street, usually wearing a surgical mask. She asks, "Am I pretty?" If you say no, she ends your life on the spot. If you say yes, she removes the mask and reveals the torn smile, sometimes lined with sharp teeth, and asks again, "Even now?" Say no or scream and you're dead. Say yes and she cuts your mouth to match hers. Some say she used to be a beautiful woman who was attacked by her jealous sister. Other versions say it was a botched cosmetic or dental procedure. Next up we have the Red Room Curse. This one became popular on Japanese message boards in the early 2000s. The setup is always the same. You're using your computer late at night and a red pop-up window appears. It asks, "Do you like the Red Room?" You can't close it. No matter what you do, it stays. And then a voice starts listing names. As it goes on, the screen fills with red. According to the story, the final name is yours. And after that, you're found dead in a room covered in BLOOD. Now, what pushed this beyond just an internet scare was a real case in 2004. A schoolgirl, simply referred to as Girl A to the media, took the life of a classmate and later talked about being obsessed with the Red Room story. So, news coverage at the time tied the two together. There's a stretch of mountains in Fukuoka where there's said to be a hidden village known as Inunaki. You're driving through the mountains, following narrow roads when your phone signal fades. Somewhere near the old Inunaki tunnel, there's a small side road, and that road is where the legend of Inunaki village begins. People who claim to have found it describe a handwritten sign near the entrance, which says the Japanese constitution does not apply beyond this point. According to the story, the people living there reject the government entirely. There are no police, no laws. Once you pass the sign, you're on your own. One of the earliest stories places the origin in the early 70s. A young couple driving toward Hisayama had their car break down and went into the forest looking for help. They came across a quiet village, so quiet it almost looked abandoned. But then an old man popped out of a house, attacking them with a sickle. Another version centers on a telephone booth near Inunaki Bridge. Supposedly it rings late at night. The call always comes from Inunaki Village. People who answer are said to be drawn there and cursed. First they lose control of their thoughts, then their body follows. Now what keeps this legend alive is the real place around it. There was a real village founded in 1691 and later abandoned and submerged during the construction of the Inunaki Dam. Nearby is the old Inunaki Tunnel, sealed after a man was burned alive inside it in 1988. Next up is Teke Teke. Most versions of this story start the same way. The kid is walking home after dark, maybe near train tracks, usually near train tracks, but maybe cutting through a quiet street they've taken 100 times before, when they hear something behind them. It's not footsteps, it's something dragging. Teke Teke is said to be the ghost of a schoolgirl who fell onto train tracks and was cut in half instead of dying, and then she just crawls around using her arms, pulling herself along the ground. The sound she makes while moving is where the name comes from, a hard, scraping noise that gets closer and closer no matter how fast you walk. If she catches you, she kills you the same way. And she doesn't get tired. Running doesn't help. Hiding doesn't work either, because once she's noticed you, she always knows where you are. The story spread through schools for years, especially in areas with busy train lines. And finally, we have Akamanto. Most versions put him in school bathrooms, usually the girls' room, the last stall at the far wall. You're on the toilet when you hear him, a calm voice that asks a simple question: red paper or blue paper? If you look up, he's standing there wearing a red cloak and a mask that hides his face. If you pick red, you die violently, slashed and flayed. If you pick blue, you're strangled until you turn blue and collapse. And if you try to be clever, asking for a different color, he drags you away somewhere, never to be seen again. Some say you're pulled straight into hell. The only way out, according to the stories, is to refuse the game. So, say you don't want either. Don't answer, just get up and leave.
Starting us off at number 10 are Laituvans. This urban legend is from Latvian folklore, and Laituvans are said to be the souls of a killed person, meaning if you were murdered, hanged, drowned, you could be one of these Laituvans. These souls are cursed to remain on Earth as long as their fate permits them to, and in some parts of Latvia they believe they're the souls of unbaptized children, so it really depends on the version you grew up with. They're meant to be extremely dangerous, and I'm not surprised. I mean, if I was stuck on Earth for centuries when I didn't want to be, I'd start causing shit as well. I think anyone would. They've been known to attack domestic animals and humans, and a common method for them is sleep paralysis. They strangle us in our sleep, but you can escape the attack if you move the toe on your left foot. Oddly specific, but facts are facts, guys. You'd think you'd be safe if you just locked the doors before bed, but wrong again. They can fit through keyholes and slits under doors, so you're out of luck there as well. Looks wise, they appear as labored, small but fast children. Very rarely do they look like ugly witch-like women, but they can. The deaths they cause are painful, you guys, and I kid you not. The victim loses all their strength, they get super tired, they're basically drowning in sweat, and they can't move since the Laituvan is lying on top of them, and with that you slowly lose the ability to breathe, bit by bit, until your heart stops beating. Coming in at number 9 is the Lake Somin monster. Located in Lake Somin in the village of Lukiv in Ukraine, this monster is meant to be 30 feet long with the body of a crocodile and the head of a snake. He makes this deep wheezing, groaning sound that vibrates throughout the whole lake, and he lives deep within the underwater caves. He lies waiting for his victims at night and dusk and comes out of the lake to drag his victims to their deaths. They can eat horses, humans, sheep, cats, dogs, anything. The first story about the monster was before World War I, where a village leader refused to pay his fishing taxes because he thought there was a strange serpent in the lake. Everyone was terrified, and an expedition was even launched but was called off when the war started. Stories arose again during World War II of a crocodile-like beast, and another expedition began, but no creature was ever found. At number 8 we have the gnome king Kyrie. According to this Dutch urban legend, Kyrie was the king of all the gnomes that live in North Brabant in the Netherlands. From their base they travelled quite a bit, and legend has it King Kyrie lived on Gnome Mountain, ironically also known as Devil's Mountain. I was gonna try saying it in the actual Dutch word, but I knew I would just completely bottle it, so I just didn't even bother. The gnomes weren't evil, surprisingly. They would help farmers farmers in their homes as well as people in other villages. They hated being seen, so would only travel at night, but if you were unfortunate enough to see a gnome, they'd have you for it. One farmer who apparently saw them was made blind in one eye just for glancing at them. The king ended up being shot by a hunter in the 1950s, and a statue of him was actually erected in the village they lived in called Hoglon. I know I said that wrong, but I really tried. Filling our number 7 slot is Peikko. This urban legend comes from Finland, and I'm so happy to include this one because I've literally seen so many comments asking for Finnish urban legends, so at least I can semi-make it happen for you guys. And I don't know if I saw a lot of comments or just the same users commenting the same thing. But anyway, Peikko is said to be a massive creature similar to a giant who can turn invisible at will, change size at will, sleep in the form of a rocky landform for hundreds of years, and worst of all, he's been known to make holes in children's teeth. Since every country has their own version of the boogeyman, the Peikko is Finland's inspired version of it. He kidnaps children, and do we really need to go into what he does with them? Like, I think we all know. Let's just skip the atrocities. We don't have to talk about that. We don't. I don't need to imagine that, neither do you. Now at number 6 is the Enchanted Moura. Hailing from Portugal, the legend of the Enchanted Moura is very popular in local folklore there. Moura is an extremely beautiful and seductive shapeshifter that lives under an occult spell that was put on her against her will. She lives in places that represent boundaries like gates and doorways and can build with incredible strength. She usually shows up combing her hair and singing. Sometimes her hair is blonde, sometimes it's black, and if you promise to help set her free, she promises to give you treasure in return. These magical maidens were said to be the souls of the girls left behind to guard the treasure their partners hid before going to Moura. They guard castles and rivers and are actually not evil. I know most female urban legend appearances are evil, but I mean, they're pretty okay. I don't want to confuse people, it isn't one person, there's many versions of this Enchanted Moura. There's many maidens. It's not just one, but they're all Moura. I'm gonna stop talking now. Coming in at number 5 is the Dancing Policeman. This urban legend may be one of the most well-known ghosts in all of Serbia. Back in the 60s, at the busiest intersection in Belgrade worked traffic policeman Jova Bull. Every day he wore a full white uniform. I'm talking white gloves, white hat, white everything. And his hand gestures were so elegant it was almost artistic. It was like a dance. Watchers were left breathless. It was like he was conducting a ballet, not Cars. His face and smile drew you in, and it's like he was everything you wanted no matter who you were. If you violated regulations, he'd just wag a finger, and he'd even blow kisses at people. He stole the hearts of so many he started appearing on TV and in the newspaper. The mayor of London even invited him to London after seeing him once, not even meeting him. He was less liked in London since his movements weren't as feminine as his counterparts, and the authorities also hated him. He didn't want to rise up, he just loved his job and wanted to keep at it. Even after being moved to a less busy intersection, he drew people in. In the end, the authorities had enough of him and made him retire early, and he died as the keeper of a small parking lot. They say you can see his spirit hover in the Belgrade intersection and the London one like an invisible ballet dancer. Honestly, this is a ghost I'd actually like to see. He seems very unproblematic and not scary. And I like a good traffic controller. I like nice traffic. Bad drivers are a no. At number 4 is the Petrin Fire. This urban legend is from the Czech Republic and it centers around Petrin Hill. Nowadays it's a lovely park and garden where you can go for a nice date or romantic stroll, but being there at night is a lot more of a risk. Despite its reputation today, there used to be a pagan grove on the hill in the middle of a group of lime trees. In the middle of this grove was a huge sacrificial altar where it said the pagan priests used to burn young virgins for their gods. When Prince Boleslav came to power, he radically went after the pagans, and their altar and grove were both destroyed and a church was built nearby instead. But the pagan faith was more resilient than that. It wasn't just gonna go away because this altar was destroyed. The pagan gods made themselves known on the hill by creating random fires that would magically contain themselves. But they weren't just fires. If people looked inside them, they would see the grimacing faces of all the pagans the prince had killed. And these fires are still happening till this day at night. They happen at random times and can last for around 20 minutes. If any of you subs are from Czech Republic and are watching this, can you let me know if you've seen these fires? I really need to know. Thank you. Filling our number 3 slot is the house on Rataskyvu Street. This one comes from Estonia and follows the story of a house located on Rataskyvu Street. The man who lived there was trash. Honestly, he wasted all of his money and honestly had no future, and on top of that he was heavily in debt. One night he thought enough was enough. Life didn't seem worth living anymore, and so he tried to commit suicide. Just as he was about to do it, a stranger broke into his room asking for one thing. Let the man get married on the top floor of his house, and if he agreed, he would be rich beyond his dreams. But there was one condition. No one could eavesdrop on this wedding. If they did, it would cost the man his money and the eavesdropper their life. And did I mention this stranger was the devil himself? Sorry, I should have included that earlier, but you know, I like the build up. Anyway, the night of the wedding, the guests arrived, but you couldn't see them. You could hear them, but they were invisible, enjoying the festivities somewhere in the ether. The lights were on, the music was playing, the house was shaking like the weight of the guests was overloading it. As it became 1 AM, everything stopped. Everything was silent. The man was expecting his fortune, but as he was making his way upstairs, his butler got sick and died. He'd been eavesdropping on the wedding, and we knew what would happen if that happened, guys. We were forewarned. That room of the house that he died in is said to be walled up now, and the window facing the street is also boarded up. Never make a deal with the devil, people. It literally never ends well. Ever. Did I mention ever? Because it doesn't. How many videos of this do I have to make? No deal with the devil. Thank you. Now at number 2 is the pastor's wife. This legend is pretty tragic, I'm not gonna lie, and it hails all the way from Denmark. Way back when, a woman married a pastor, but she was hiding a massive secret. Under no circumstances ever did she ever want kids, so much so, she found a witch who told her she was gonna have 7 kids in the future. The witch gave her 7 stones to throw into a well, and that would prevent all the pregnancies. She did it and resumed normal life. Her and the pastor went for a walk one night, and he realized his wife didn't have a shadow. Everyone has a shadow, why the hell doesn't she? He realized she must have done something horrifically evil for this to happen and tried getting her to confess to him, but she refused. He kicked her out of their house and forced every villager to refuse her. He cursed her by saying it's more likely a red rose would grow out of his stone dining room table than for her to redeem herself. Harsh words. Absolutely crushed, the woman left the village and found a priest in another village nearby. He said to redeem herself she had to stay in the church overnight with a book he had given her, and that she can't give the book to anyone no matter what because many will be asking for it. And he was right. That night she was haunted and spat on by all the kids she would have had. They verbally abused her for being so selfish, but she got through it and the next day she was redeemed. But the priest said the only catch now is that you only have 1 day to live. She rushed back to her village hoping to see her husband one last time, but again no one let her in except one kind soul. She died behind an oven in that person's house, and the next day the pastor was heart attack level shocked when he saw a red rose coming out of his stone table. Overcome with heartache, he searched for his wife everywhere, and when he found out she was dead, he went mad and died soon after. I have no words. It hurts me. It hurts me here. And finally, at number 1 is Polodnica. Hailing from Slovakia but appearing in a lot of Slavic folklore, Polodnica is the noon demon, also known as Lady Midday or the Noon Witch. She mostly appears during the summer as a beautiful young woman in white, or an old hag, or even a 12-year-old girl who roams fields in the countryside. She takes the form of dust clouds and then appears literally out of nowhere and is always carrying a pair of shears or a scythe. She'll trick workers on the field by asking them a hard question, and if they answer it wrong, which most of them do, she'll quickly just change the subject and then behead them. Literally savage. She either beheads you, or if she's having a good day, she'll just give you a terminal illness. I don't know which one is better, to be fair. Neither really. One's a sudden death and the other is a slow burner. I don't know which one I'd choose. Which one would you choose? Probably the beheading, I feel. But then, I'd have more time with it. Either way, let me know in the comments. She's known as a personification of getting sunstroke, and her presence has been linked to causing heat stroke in many people now. She causes aches in their neck, and if it's bad, one can even go mad.
Number 10. Poveglie Island, Italy. Poveglie is one of the scariest haunted islands in Europe. A series of mysterious activities were detected on the island, and that is probably the main reason why the island is closed for visitors today. The island was the place where victims of the plague were quarantined and infected dead bodies were disposed of. It is said the remains of over 100,000 souls are buried there, and let me just say, that is a lot. The island was later the site of a nursing home and psychiatric hospital. Now it's rumored that it had a mad doctor who carried out unconventional treatments on his patients here before eventually throwing himself from the church's bell tower or being pushed, whichever you believe. Due to this, the bell was later removed, but people from the surrounding islands claim to have heard it echoing in the night on multiple occasions. The hospital eventually closed and the island was abandoned in 1968. Number 9. Hellfire Club, Ireland. No, not the Hellfire Club you're thinking of. This has nothing to do with Stranger Things, unfortunately, and let me just throw in, Eddie deserved better. Anyway, the Hellfire in Dublin was built as a hunting lodge where Dublin elites used to gather in the 1700s. The ruins of the club are located on top of Montpelier Hill overlooking the adjacent Massey Woods. There have been numerous stories about black masses, animals, and even human sacrifice rituals happening in the Hellfire Club, but that's not all. Multiple witnesses claim to have seen a satanic-like creature with a human appearance and cloven feet. So, literally, the devil. You mean the devil. Another common visitor is the ghost of a young lady who is believed to have been burned inside a barrel and rolled down the hill.
Starting us off for number 10 is the Wild Hunt, and this one is borderline ancient. The first account of the Wild Hunt was back in 1127 when a historical document revealed this. Many men both saw and heard a great number of huntsmen hunting. The huntsmen were black, huge and hideous, and rode on black horses and on black he-goats, and their hounds were jet black with eyes like saucers and horrible, end quote. Apparently the huntsmen were sinners while they were alive, and so the nightly exercise was just part of their punishment, and if them on their own isn't scary enough, they were also accompanied by demons. Lone travelers would get taken by the whole group of them and dragged to the literal pits of hell, which I'm not here for, by the way. I don't know about you personally, but personally that's not my vibe. Personally. I don't speak for everyone. Coming in at number 9 is Red Cap. So a bit of a history lesson for you. England and Scotland were at war for far too long back in the day, and that made the Anglo-Scottish border a dangerous place to be. Raiders from both countries would go and commit crimes on the other side of the border and come back and not be punished for it. And with horrible people, there are also horrible creatures. Red Cap was an evil creature that took the form of an old man with iron shoes. He had long pointed teeth, and you already know that doesn't sit well with me, red eyes, talon-like fingers, and long hair. And the cherry on top was his red hat. Red Cap would ravage all the abandoned castles along the border, hunting for bodies left behind from the war, and use their blood to dye his cap. And if he didn't find any bodies, he'd just wait around and kill an unlucky passerby. Apparently the only way to defeat him is to either brandish a crucifix or recite biblical scripture, after which he should scream and disappear into a ball of fire, and if he doesn't, well, don't quote me on that. No cap. I had to do it. Come on, this is me, I had to do it. Chris is like, yeah. At number 8, we have the Vampires of Burton-on-Trent. No folklore video is ever complete without the mention of some kind of vampires or another. According to an old Anglo-Saxon chronicle, there were 2 peasants in Burton-on-Trent that had died, yet were seen walking around town with their coffins on their backs. They would knock on people's doors, calling out their names, and whoever was called upon would very quickly fall sick and die. Now, suspicious, the villagers decided to open up the coffins of the 2 men to see the corpses were completely undecayed and their mouths were covered with cloths drenched in blood. Being like, absolutely not, the villagers then beheaded the corpses, cut their hearts out, and burned the bodies. Good going, guys, I would have done the same. 2 black birds were seen emerging from the fire, and after that point the men were never seen again. I honestly feel like Twilight and the Vampire Diaries has really ruined vampires for me. I always have to remind myself they're not like Edward Cullen or the Salvatore brothers, they're like this. Don't fall in love with them. It's not cute. Let's not romanticize vampires. Let's cancel that culture right now. Starting now. Filling on our 7th slot is Cutty Dyer. Now the legend of Cutty Dyer goes way back to at least 1879. That's the first time this creature was talked about in local publications, and everyone had already been it for a while. This creature is said to be an ogre or a water sprite that stalked the stream of the River Yo or Ashburn, depending on the version of the story that you hear. The legend originated in the town of Ashburton, where he supposedly lived under the King's Bridge. Isn't it usually trolls that live under the bridge? What's going on? Katidaya would wait around stalking children and any drunkards that came by. He'd then pounce on them, drowning them and then gorging on their blood. That's appetizing. Parents used to tell his story to their kids, kind of like an ode to the boogeyman, so they'd stay away from the river. 2 people have even said to have witnessed him standing waist deep in the water, bearing shark teeth and bright glowing red eyes. Now at number 6 is Spring-Heeled Jack. Good old Jack terrorized Victorian Britain, namely London, from the 1830s onwards. First mentioned back in 1810, 3 women reported being attacked by a tall figure wearing a skin-tight black suit, long fingers, red eyes, and metal claws. Apparently he would breathe blue fire into their faces, not burning them, but paralyzing them. A fear was ripe around the city, everyone was bricks, and rightfully so. Many groups even set out to find and kill Jack, but he was never caught. As he gained popularity, his attacks became few and far between, because mans like to keep it low-key. You know how it is. Keep it on the down low, on the DL. Like me, I'm a very low-key person. Ha! Not. Coming in at number 5 is the Guy Trash. Now already the countryside of Yorkshire is pretty much deserted. The hills have a bunch of footpaths around them that people haven't used in centuries. So because of that and the major lack of signage, it's almost inevitable that one would get lost if travelling the area. The Guy Trash was said to be the most dangerous spirit to live in Yorkshire, and here I'm like, damn, there's more than one spirit? No. Looks wise, it could appear as a black horse or dog or mule with fiery red eyes. It would stalk the footpaths looking for lost travellers and would then lead them further astray, so they'd be even more screwed. Once the traveller was lost with no hope, the Guy Trash would either disappear, leaving them for dead in the dark, or it'd attack them, killing them instantly. At number 4 is the Mermaid of Galloway. First mentioned back in 1810, this tale goes as follows. The Mermaid of Galloway used to live in a breathtaking burn or watercourse, and every night she would sit on a rock and locals would come to her seeking medical advice. Everything was all rainbows and butterflies, but one particular religious woman thought the mermaid was the work of the devil. She ended up pushing the mermaid's rock back into the water, and so when the mermaid appeared the next day, she was so distraught due to the lack of seat. She cried out saying, "You may look to your empty cradle and I'll look to my stain." She said more than that, but it's all in Old English and I didn't even understand it, and I figured you guys wouldn't either, and it simply wasn't relevant. The next day, the religious woman's baby was found dead in its cradle and the mermaid was never seen again. I mean, never take a woman's seat. You know what they say. No one says that, but I do. Filling our number 3 slot is the Kelpie and the 9 Children. Reverend John Gregerson Campbell was the first person to recount the story in his book Superstitions of the Highlands and Islands of Scotland back in 1900. Legend has it a group of 9 children were roaming around Lochaber in the Scottish Highlands when they came across a relatively massive, friendly horse. This horse was so big that it had room for all 9 kids to sit on its back, and as soon as they did, the horse galloped off with the kids fearing for their lives. They wanted to jump off but were magically stuck to the horse, and only one of the kids survived because he had a pocket knife in his bag. He cut off his finger that was attached to the horse's mane and watched it dive into a lock, taking its damned cargo with it. None of the kids were seen again, but the following day, guts and other organs were seen floating on the surface of the water. Now at number 2 is the Witch Hare of Cleveland. Not Cleveland, Ohio, we're talking Britain, baby. So this story came to light in the early 19th century. Apparently a group of farmers were out hunting hares when they ran into Nanny X, a well-known witch in the area. She told them that she would tell them where a huge hare was, but that they should not set a black dog on it to kill it. Very specific instructions, but they agreed. She then pointed out a massive brush where of course there was a hare underneath. The hare started running for the hills, and of course the farmers went off after it. Just as the hare finally reached Nanny X's cottage, a massive demon hellhound appeared out of thin air, snapping the hare's legs and taking a massive bite out of its leg. Distraught, the hunters went to her cottage to apologize for letting the black dog get the hare, but when they went inside they found her half dead in bed with a massive lump out of her thigh, exactly where the hellhound had bit the hare. And finally, at number 1 is Black Annis, aka Black Annie. First mentioned in a title deed back in 1764, Annie was a witch that apparently lived in a cave known as Black Annie's Bower. The cave has since been lost to erosion and was supposedly built over for housing after World War I. Looks wise, she had a grimy blue face, long arms that she used to reach through windows and snatch people's kids, and claws made of iron like she could slice a head clean off. Hide your kids, hide your wife. She would go around Leicestershire haunting locals and looking for animals or children to eat. Once she'd kidnapped a child, she would drain them of all their blood, then drape their skin on the tree outside her cave. Then she'd wait for the skin to dry out before adding it to her skirt that was already made from kids of murdered past.
Going off number 10 now, we have the Loup Cassol. This urban legend originates from the Gascony region of France. The Loup Cassol is said to be a disgusting, grotesque creature that wanders the countryside of southern France. It's described as half snake, half snail. Its massive and long body carries an enormous shell on its back. Its hideous mouth is surrounded by several long, hairy and slime-covered tentacles that can extend for not inches or feet, but for miles. Yes, you heard me right, miles. They send these tentacles stretching out from the caves they live in. They wait for people to accidentally touch one and then bang! They grab hold of you and drag you right down underground, where they swallow you whole with their huge mouths. Next up at number 9 now, we have meat pies. In the 15th century, the story goes that a barber and a cook made a deal in Paris. The barber would slit the throats of his clients, who were mainly poor college students. He would then chop up their bodies and send them through a trapdoor to a cook straight to his kitchen. The cook would then use the human meat to make his pies and sell them to the public. There were many different flavors and sizes to reflect the diversity of his supply. Business grew for both of them, and the bakery became known as one of the city's most well-known patisseries. Nobody was wise to what was going on, at least no human. You see, one day a German student called Alaric was visiting the barber. His dog sensed that something wasn't right and began barking at the neighbors. When people came to investigate, they found the cellar full of torture tools used to hack apart the corpses. The two men confessed to their heinous crimes and were burnt alive in iron cages. At number 3 now, we have the Tuileries Phantom. This is another story involving a man called Jean. He worked as a butcher near the Tuileries Palace in Paris during the reign of Catherine de Medici in the 16th century. She ordered Jean to be killed because he had threatened to reveal many of the royal family's secrets. Just before he was executed, he told his executioner that he would rise from the dead. The executioner left Jean's corpse in the garden. He then went to tell Catherine the deed had been done. When he returned to the garden to dispose of the body, he found Jean's corpse missing. A few days later, the Queen's astrologist reported having a vision. In it, he claimed he saw all of the inhabitants of the palace die a horrible death, and that Jean would haunt the palace until it was destroyed. Not long after that, the executioner was on his way to the palace when he looked behind him and froze in horror. There stood Jean, drenched in blood, as if he was still alive, thus beginning the legend of the Red Man. He is said to have haunted the grounds ever since. People believe that if you come across John, the Little Red Man, that means a terrible tragedy will follow shortly. Next up at number 2 now, we have the Devil's Door of Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a very famous cathedral in Paris. Many visitors notice its elegant side doors with their intricate iron patterns. They were designed by an artist called Biscornet. His talents were known throughout France. The doors were considered a masterpiece, taking months to complete in Biscornet's workshop. Parisians were so impressed that some of them began to doubt that he did it alone. This was the 1300s, an age of deep superstition in Europe. Some people believe that Biscornet had sold his soul to the devil in exchange for this masterpiece. Locals said they had been to his studio during his work hours, where they had found him unconscious on the floor next to the finished piece, which had been mysteriously completed in record time. When they came to first use the door on the cathedral, the priest claimed that they could only get it to work after sprinkling it with holy water. Biscornet died soon after, and in the years since, many experts have struggled to explain how exactly he made this with the basic tools of his time. Some people also point to his name. B means two or twice, while cornet means horn. Put it together and you have the two-horned man. And finally, at number 1 now, we have the Chateau de Brissac. This old French castle in the Loire Valley was first built in the 11th century. It's been almost 1,000 years since then, and its walls have seen some grisly deaths and hauntings. Perhaps the most famous is the story of Charlotte. She was the wife of Jacques de Brezé, the lord of the castle in the 1400s. One night he came home after a hunt and had dinner with Charlotte. Then they went to bed in their separate rooms. The marriage was said to be for political reasons, not love. That night he was woken by his servant, who said Charlotte had another man in his room, and it was one of his hunting partners. He flew into a rage, grabbed his sword and attacked both of them, slashing and hacking away. By the time they were dead, their bodies had almost 100 wounds inflicted. Charlotte was actually the half-sister of King Louis VI. He stripped Jacques of all of his titles and took possession of his castle. As for Charlotte, well, people say she never left. Her traumatic death made her a ghost, cursed to haunt the castle forever. They say at night on the walls of the castle you can see a female ghost in a green dress with bloody, gaping holes all over her body. She is silent except for when she returns to the room where she was murdered, where deathly moans and cries can be heard until dawn. Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Big Grey Man of Ben Macdui. Amphir Liath Mór is the Gaelic name of a mythical creature known as the Big Grey Man, who is said to dwell at the summit of Scotland's Ben Macdui mountain. Over the years, many climbers have felt his presence or even seen him, a lumbering giant that skulks in the thick fog of the mountain peak. He's often described as being very large, sometimes about 10 feet tall when standing completely upright. Short hairs cover his whole body, especially thick on his broad shoulders. His arms are also said to swing wildly when he's sighted. Sightings of this creature have gone back for centuries, but the first credible account came from Professor Norman Colley in 1891. The day he saw it, he made a note in his journal saying, "I was returning home from a calm on the summit in the mist when I began to think I heard something else other than my own footsteps. For every few steps I took, I heard a crunch and then another crunch, as if someone was walking after me, but taking footsteps 3 or 4 times the length of my own." His account ends up going into much more detail, but for many people, this account and a few others are more than enough to convince them of the Big Grey Man of Ben Macdui. Moving on to number 9 now, we have Cathedral House Hotel. This building in Glasgow was originally built in 1877 as a halfway house for prisoners who had been released from the nearby Duke Street prison. That prison was the site of many executions over the years, including 12 in the 20th century. The last person to be executed in Scotland, Susan Newell, was hanged at the prison in October 1923 after being found guilty of strangling a paperboy. In the years since the last execution, locals swear that the spirits of the executed have made their home in the nearby Cathedral House Hotel. Some say they have felt a ghostly presence brush up against them on the staircase. There have also been several reports of 2 ghostly children being heard on the top floor of the hotel and items of furniture moving of their own accord. In 2005, the Ghost Finders Scotland group conducted a thorough investigation using high-tech equipment. They recorded unusual EMF and tri-field readings along with light orbs and various other anomalies appearing on both video footage and still photographs. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Well of the Dead. Nice name. Many Scots will be familiar with the Jacobite Rising of 1746. On April 16th of that year, the Scottish forces fighting for independence from the British were defeated, suffering heavy losses. Many lost their lives on the fields of Culloden. Legend says that birds no longer sing above the boggy land where Jacobites made their final stand. That rhymed, that wasn't intentional. Locals have witnessed a tartan-wearing spirit wandering through the moor there. Those who get close enough manage to hear it muttering one single word: defeated. Every single year on April 16th, the anniversary of the battle, they say you can still hear the clashing of swords and the sound of men dying, locked in their bloody battle for eternity. Moving on to number 7 now, we have Jenny with the Iron Teeth. So we talked about Gorbals in the last video, the Glasgow neighbourhood that's home to Glasgow's necropolis of sorts, where an estimated 50,000 people are buried. As such, it's not too surprising that the area has made it into one of our videos for a second time now, but now it's for a different reason. In 1954, a policeman responded to reports that hundreds of children had descended upon the cemetery. When he arrived, the children had begun to disperse. He questioned them and they swore that 2 children had just been devoured by the Gorbals vampire. Some of you may remember the Gorbals vampire from the last video. Well, the locals didn't believe the children, but not for the reason you might think. They claimed the children had actually seen Jenny with the Iron Teeth. It had been many years since they had heard that name. She is said to be a demonic hag who roamed Glasgow Green in the 19th century, dragging children to her lair with great big metal jaws. The reports made people fear that she had returned, and in the years since then, perhaps she's never left. Coming in number 6 now, we have Netta Fornario. This is perhaps one of the strangest missing person cases I've ever heard of. Netta Fornario was a member of an occult group called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. They practiced ritual magic. tarot cards, mysticism, and held a solid belief in the powers of telepathy. On top of all that, Netta also had a personal interest in fairies. In 1929, Netta went to the small Scottish island of Iona. Nobody is quite sure why she did it. She arrived at a local inn and spent most of her days wandering the tiny island alone. After a few weeks, her innkeeper woke up to find that Netta was in a frenzy of packing her luggage to leave. Netta said that she needed to leave right away, as several individuals were attacking her telepathically. The innkeeper told her it would be impossible to leave that day, as the boat to the mainland did not run on Sundays. Netta left the room in a rage, returning a few hours later to say that she had decided to stay on Iona after all. She left on one of her walks that night, but when she didn't return later on, her innkeeper raised the alarm. After a 2-day search for her, they found Netta's dead body. A cross had been cut into the turf with a dagger, and Netta's body was lying on top of it. A doctor could not determine how or when she died. Many people believe that she was mentally ill and suicidal, but others argue that she was the victim of some really dark magic.
At number 10, we have the green clawed beast. Imagine you're out enjoying your afternoon, lounging on an inner tube, floating in the river, when all of a sudden you are attacked by a creature. Because that is exactly what happened to a woman named Naomi Johnson. On August 21st of 1955, Miss Johnson was out enjoying a swim with her friend in Ohio River near Evansville, Indiana. While swimming, Miss Johnson said that she was suddenly grabbed and pulled underwater by a large, hairy claw hand. She struggled underwater until she was able to kick herself free. She resurfaced only to shortly be pulled under again by this creature. Thankfully, Miss Johnson managed to escape once again. When she reached land, she had multiple bruises and wounds on her leg, one of which was a green claw print shaped hand. Now, Miss Johnson never got a good look at the creature, but could sense how big and strong it was from the force it used on her. This encounter was reported to an Air Force colonel who took detailed notes and then told Miss Johnson and her friend to never mention it again. Very suspicious. What is this man hiding? Was it a creature of his own that escaped? No one knows. But what they do know is to never swim in that river again.
Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Clown Graveyard. With a name like that, you probably think it's a metaphor for something, but the name is literal and the story is tragic. In Forest Park, Illinois lies Woodlawn Cemetery. Some of the graves there are marked by elephant statues. An engraving at the base of one large elephant is inscribed with the words Showman's League of America. All of the graves are marked with the same death date, June 22nd, 1918. On that fateful night, members of the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus were asleep in the rear cars of a train that was passing through the area. At 4 a.m, they stopped in the town of Hammond, Indiana to cool an overheated axle box. Little did they know that right behind them, a train driver had fallen asleep at the helm of his empty military train. He missed all the automatic signals and flares that warned him of the stalled train. He smashed right into the wooden circus cars. The survivors tried to scramble out, but soon the train lanterns had ignited the wreckage. It's thought that up to 110 circus employees were killed. They were buried in the mass graves. Many of the victims' names were not even known, so some of the markings have engravings like Baldy, 4-horse driver, or unidentified male. They say that their restless spirits still haunt the graveyard. Apparently they are also joined with the spirits of some of the circus elephants that died. Locals say that to this day the sound of phantom elephants can be heard at night, which I think is a lot creepier than humans. I don't know. Moving on to number 9 now, guys, we have the Thunderbirds. I wish this one was about the nice puppet show that I used to watch as a kid, but it's not. The Thunderbirds are creatures that many people have seen in Illinois, giant birds with wingspans of up to 20 feet. One famous local legend in the town of Alton is that of the Piasa bird, a name given by the Illinois Native Americans meaning bird that devours a man. Now that gives you guys a little clue as to why people fear them. Although the legend has existed for hundreds of years, things took a turn in the 1970s. In 1973, Ruth Lowe was cleaning up after her family had dinner in Lawndale, Illinois. The kids were playing outside when she heard a piercing scream and knew it was her son. When she ran outside, she saw 2 massive birds flying in formation and chasing her son, pecking and clawing at his shoulders. The larger one sunk its claws right into his shirt and lifted him off the ground. ground. Ruth managed to fight them off and release her son, but only after they carried him a distance of over 35 feet. Locals believe that this was a modern day sighting of some thunderbirds, mythical creatures who have been mentioned in Native American stories for hundreds of years and now seem to be scaring a lot of people in the area. Next, number 8 now, we have Bloods Point Road. Drive about an hour and a half northwest of Chicago and you can find Bloods Point Road. It's been the focus of a number of paranormal investigations over the years, and not just because of its creepy name. Locals say that as you drive along it, trees begin to look like humans standing guard. Now they say they stretch out in an effort to grab you. You might think that sounds creepy, but they say that the trees are just attempting to warn you of things to come if you choose to continue down that road. Others say that the trees themselves are haunted, that ghosts congregate there. They say that if you're hidden, you can even watch the ghosts moving between the trees. All of this isn't helped by the fact that the road is home to the Bloods Point Cemetery. Legend says that actual hellhounds guard the cemetery gates. These evil dogs appear out of nowhere and attack visitors before instantly disappearing. On dark nights with a full moon, they've even been known to wander out of the cemetery and down Blood Point's road. Perhaps that's what the trees were warning against.
In our 8th spot, we have Walhalla Road. Located in North Columbus, this road is supposedly one of the scariest roads in Ohio. Legend has it that around 1950, a doctor by the name of Mooney and his wife and kids used to live along the road. It is said that one night Mr. Mooney lost his mind and murdered his family along this road. Apparently, if you walk this road in the dead of night, then you will see the ghost of Dr. Mooney murdering his family. You will also be able to hear them screaming and hollering. Like, the name of the road is literally Walhalla, like holla, like get it? Just a weird coincidence. Also, if you walk this road at night, it is said that you can see an eerie blue light appearing from the attic of the Mooney's old mansion. Coming in at number 7, we have Loveland Castle. Although it may sound like a nice place to go for a honeymoon, don't be fooled. It's not. Well, maybe if you guys have a thing for ghosts. Not judging. Now, this castle was actually handmade by a man named Harry Andrews back in 1929. Harry was obsessed with medieval times and architecture and decided to build this towering castle in the middle of the Midwest. Andrew passed away in April of 1981 at the age of 91. Loveland Castle is now a museum spot for tourists to visit. It is said that people have seen a shadowy figure roam the halls that resembles Harry. Typically, this ghost makes an appearance when something in the castle is going to go wrong. This may be Harry's way of still looking after the castle after passing away. In fact, one time, sounds of slamming doors could be heard upstairs. Upon investigation, they noticed that the septic tank was about to overflow. They believe that the slamming doors was Harry's way to warn them about this. And lastly, there's also said to be another spirit roaming the castle. This spirit is referred to as the Viking entity. Now, people believe that this entity is attached to one of Harry's antique swords in the castle. This Viking can be seen in a long black cloak, carrying a sword at his chest.
Moving on to number 7 now, we have the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. For 2 weeks in 1934, the residents of Mattoon, Illinois were terrorized by a killer known only as the Mad Gasser. On August 31st, a man called Urban Rafe awoke to a strange smell in his bedroom that made him physically ill. He woke his wife up, who wondered if there might perhaps be a problem with the gas downstairs. When she tried to get up though, she found that she couldn't move her legs. The symptoms went away after a while though, and she found there was nothing wrong with the gas. Nearby, that exact same night, a woman went to check on her daughter, but found that she too was paralyzed from the waist down. The next night, a similar thing happened to another woman. The police began investigating, but found no clues. The local newspapers suggested that there was a madman out in the dark, creeping around and pumping this paralyzing gas into people's homes. He became known as the Mad Gasser. The panic in the town reached such levels that even the FBI got involved, but they too were unable to find a culprit. Reports have died down in the decades since, but some residents are on alert for a copycat Mad Gasser. Coming at number 6 now, we have the Enfield Horror. In April 1973, residents of Enfield, Illinois were all talking about a creature simply known as the Enfield Horror. On April 25th, a boy was attacked in his backyard by a creature with T-Rex-like arms, short claws, pink eyes, grey slimy skin and 3 legs. Later, the creature tried breaking into a neighbor's home where it was shot by a man named Henry McDonald. McDaniel with a .22 caliber pistol. As the media picked up on the story, a news director for WWKI radio claimed to have actually taped the monster's screams as it ran off. He said he saw the creature cover 50 to 85 feet with just 3 leaps and then vanish out of sight. The police dismissed the reports and discouraged hunters from trying to find the creature. Others ignored the warnings and began investigating. Some parallels were found between the creature's description and some similar reports from the nearby town of Mount Vernon. Those reports came from the 1940s, leading some people to believe that this creature appears every 40 to 50 years, which I think means we are due for the return of the Enfield horror right about now. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Murfreesboro Mud Monster. In 1973, a young couple was parked by a desolate river in Murfreesboro, Illinois for a romantic night. Suddenly, a huge, wet, hairy beast just climbed out of the water. It was covered in mud. It let out a piercing roar which they would later say sounded like an eagle shrieking into a microphone. The couple fled without waiting to find out what it would do to them. For the next 2 weeks though, the whole town was in panic mode as more and more people had encounters with the huge albino beast which came to be known as the Big Muddy Monster. When police investigated, they found huge prints in the ground which seemed to match the size that others had described. When an officer leant down to inspect the print, he heard a horrifyingly shrill screech nearby. The police chief of the town said in an interview, "A lot of things in life are unexplained and this is another one. We don't know what the creature is, but we do believe what these people saw was real." Moving on to number 4 now, we have the Chesterfield Witch. Near the town of Arcola, in what is now known as Amish country, lies the small town of Chesterfield. Its cemetery is said to be home to a witch. Legend says that in life she stood up for the women who were being mistreated in the Amish community. In retaliation, they labelled her a witch and actually accused her of worshipping the devil. The community elders banished her. After that, nobody heard from her. She just disappeared completely. A while later, her body was found in a nearby field. They labelled her death as just down to natural causes and took her to a local funeral home. They put her body on display as a sort of attraction